We've all been hearing about the announcement that we have mapped the human genome, but what the public doesn't know is now there's a great race by genomic companies and biotech companies and life science companies to find the treasure in the map. The treasure are the individual genes that make up the blueprint of the human race. Every time they capture a gene and isolate it, these biotech companies claim it as intellectual property. The breast cancer gene, the cystic fibrosis gene, it goes on and on and on. If this goes unchallenged in the world community, within less than 10 years, a handful of global companies will own directly or through license the actual genes that make up the evolution of our species, and they're now beginning to patent the genomes of every other creature on this planet. In the age of biology, the politics is going to sort out between those who believe life first has intrinsic value, and therefore we should choose technologies and commercial venues that honor the intrinsic value. And then we're going to have people who believe, look, life is simply utility. It's commercial fare, and they will line up with the idea to let the marketplace be the ultimate arbiter of all of the age of biology.
It starts with a simple question and ends in objective reality. Through our journey from there to here, we find one another and ourselves. And as the next 24 hours breaks free from our last, we gaze onward in reflection of the day.
Come to your own conclusions. Stay vigilant.
Welcome to the Daily Wrap-Up.
Wednesday, July 30th, 2025. Thank you for joining me today. Got a bit of a special episode for you today. Essentially had a really an amazing, very interesting, sprawling interview with 7Cs today in studio. And after we got done, like the moment we got done with the interview, there was something that came across, which you might have already seen in regard to Donald Trump leaning into a 60 company, big tech-wide health monitoring kind of surveillance apparatus. And it was just, I mean, you'll see why as we go through today, how perfect that was for exactly what we discussed today. So basically what you're going to see today, which this is live, this is me coming on live to break some things ahead of what I'll play the interview after this opening part. Can't really say how long it'll be. I'm going to go through this with no rush, but the latter half of the show today will be my interview with 7Cs from today, discussing largely the vast majority of which, and we didn't plan it this way, but around Palantir, around health, the overlap of mRNA, and the surveillance around all of it, and where this is kind of going in some other points we address with the direction of whether it's the surveillance kind of Panopticon or whether we're talking about the kind of mainstream alternative media dealing with the way people are seeing it. We have a really great conversation today. So I'm going to start with the right out of the gate with the article that I saw that will make sense in its own right with everything we've been discussing up until now. And I'm going to make a few points that I think are just in this one little segment, just crazy, which where this is going, but you won't be surprised. And then it'll just make that much more sense with where we go with the conversation. It'll add and flesh this out in a lot of interesting ways. So I hope you enjoy this today. And this wasn't planned this way, but I'll tell you, if you like the way this comes out, if you find that there's more value to it or interest in it with it having kind of a dual aspect, let me know. Maybe we can do more like this. Maybe we can plan them that way. But let's get right to it today. The point today, the main thing that jumped out at me after we were done with the interview was this article here. And this is interesting in its own right with what we've been talking about. And honestly, I'm kind of continually shocked. I shouldn't say shocked. It seems kind of expected at this point. But why the Trump administration, Trump in particular, continues to do things in a direction that seem to be not just kind of rubbing the wrong way of most of his base, but like the Stargate platform in the first week. It's not like that was just a slight deviation. That was the exact opposite of what was promised. I don't mean like the exact stopping them, removing them from literally making a platform direction for his administration. And why that's not enough to shake people free, I don't know. It has been for a lot of people. But we're seeing these other agendas we'll get into in a future show, you know, Epstein and other things that are related to that. I'm sure we'll continue following that. Now, for the podcast, the headline is Trump administration is launching a new private health tracking system with big tech's help. I mean, really, to me, it appears to be big tech in it, not help, but big tech controlling this. but the idea of a new private health tracking idea. Now it's being sold to you as the direction it should be going in, but this exact thing was presented to you through the Biden administration, Great Reset and Build Back Better, and that exact direction, public-private partnerships, right? That was the World Economic Forum. That's one of the main things they lean into. And so with this being a private element, if you were upset about that during Biden, but now not with Trump, maybe you should reflect on how that makes sense. If it's just that Trump is the guy that will do it right, then I guess that would mean that it's not about the surveillance, the tracking, and the invasiveness and the privacy. It's just about the guy doing it, which again, maybe you should reflect on that. July 30th, today. The Trump administration is pushing an initiative for millions of Americans to upload personal health data and medical records on new apps and systems run by private tech companies, promising that will make it easier to access health records and monitor wellness. Now, as always, this is not the, in your face, we're going to force you to be a part of this because it's better for society. But this is always how this goes. You're going to get the usual pushback, and rightly so. Maybe this is only what it will be, and it's benign, and tomorrow it will mean nothing. But usually, historically, we can see these things start like this, where it's this your choice, and it's going to make everything better. And then even right in the beginning, but usually a little bit later, it becomes, well, this is your benefit for doing so, until later you're at the back of the line if you don't do it, until later you're being arrested, put in jail, threatened if you don't do it because everyone's going to die. We've seen this already. Not to say that we know that's where this will go, but it's one part of where this is all going. And I already have the clips pulled up of RFK and the wearable direction because this very much overlaps. President Donald Trump is expected to deliver remarks, which I believe they already did. I have some overviews we'll go over at the end of this part of the segment. Is expected to deliver remarks on the initiative today in the East Room, which I believe again happened. The event is expected to involve leaders from more than 60 companies. Now, right here, right? If Donald Trump, let's just continue to make it about the government, because it's not just about Trump. If the U.S. government decided, well, I guess that's hard to make this point without using the Trump point, but so Trump is somebody you want to believe in. If he was honest about the direction that you guys wanted, or not honest, but just if he meant it, if he believed in what you were saying and it was supposed to go in a different avenue, would it involve groups like Google and Amazon? Groups, by the way, which the right would call out in 100 different ways as it pertains to the overlap with the Democrat engine, the administrations. But now it's okay, like BlackRock. It's okay when Trump does it, right? It doesn't make much sense. This is why, and I'm only making those points to reach the people that are maybe somewhere seeing this, but unsure how to, that's wrong. Call it out because it should be bad no matter who does it, right? Or rather, it should matter to you if it does in any sense, no matter who does it, is the right way to say that. The point, though, companies like Google and Amazon and a bunch of others will list are not the representation of what you would expect if the direction would be different. We're fighting the deep state. We're going away from the invasive government, growing government, more spending. This is bigger government. This is the same problem. Now, this may not appear to be government to you if you're not paying attention, but you have to understand the way that this public-private partnership, the fascistic overlap of corporations and government have become our ruling structure. It's been that way a long time. Palantir is just the newest example, and it's very clear. The new system will focus on diabetes and weight management, controversial artificial intelligence that helps patients. The digital tools, such as QR codes and apps that register patients for check-ins or track medications. And let's be clear, this is not just some little thing that's going to give you, a new thing that they'll do if you like it. This is something that's being immersed, or rather the right word would be embedded throughout our health system right now, and has been for a while. But this is now coming from the highest part, the executive branch, talking about this massive push. Now these companies are getting involved. It's going to be everywhere you look. This is going to be a massive pressure point. The initiative, my opinion, obviously, but it's already happening, spearheaded by the administration, has already freely shared highly personal data about Americans, as you guys know, in many ways that have tested legal bounds. Now, that's a nice way to write it. Unconstitutional, illegal. I'm not afraid to say that. What they did with all the different aspects there's many crimes that were committed in all this. But I guess what? Because he's president, that there's no legal reality there, or no, he has immunity. Of course, you'd always make that argument regardless of the partisan side, right? Because you're objective and consistent in your logic. We know that's not what's happening. The point is that already have they stolen information, or rather, removed the silos, given access to Israel. All this is public information. So that should matter in and of its own, regardless of who what side it appeals to. But what we're seeing now is this unsiloed information being accessed by multiple governments that is being used not just for health, If at all, quite frankly. This might just be the head fake, because we're going to get into in a moment what I really think the larger part about this is. And it's not just digital twins, which is overlap with health, but it's all that we've talked about. It's what comes from the digital twins, the surveillance, the mapping, the kind of algorithmic predictive programming. That's what this is in a huge way. That's why this data is so important. Yes, my opinion. But again, this is coming from statements of people that are involved in this. There's a major aspect of this that's not being freely shared with what this is. And it says it could put patients' desires for more convenience at their doctor's office on a collision course with their expectations for their medical information to be kept private, which, look, I don't think that's even the case anymore. If ever, you're private. We saw that during COVID-19. They don't need excuse, but they can sure as hell use whatever they want to remove that or not try, not abide by what are the standards of today. Down here, it says CMS will also recommend, and that this is CMS was let's grab it real quick so I don't misquote it. That's weird. For some reason, it's not listing it. It's the name of the group we're dealing with. I was just going to give you the exact. Usually you'd have it in parentheses, right? Great job, corporate media. Well, let's keep going. The point is the group, CMS, will also recommend a list of apps on Medicare.gov that are designed to help people manage chronic diseases, as well as help them select healthcare providers and insurance plans. We're going to get into the insurance overlap in a second. Digital privacy advocates are skeptical that patients are able to count on their data being stored securely. Well, again, we talked about this in the interview. You'll hear in a minute. That never happens. We say the same point about COVID. And I think I said France was the earliest example, but there's plenty of them where they go, we'll never do that. And then they do that. Oops, it was a mistake. Oh, we did it. Somebody else did it without. It doesn't matter what the narrative is. It almost always happens. So why we would trust them now? It's up to you. The federal government, however, has done little to regulate health apps or telehealth programs, said Jeffrey Chester of the Center for Digital Democracy. Health and Human Services Secretary RFK Jr. and those with his inner circle have pushed for more technology in healthcare, advocating for wearable devices that monitor wellness and telehealth as one part of it. Continuing, it says, Kennedy also sought to collect more data from Americans' medical records, which he has previously said he wants to use to study autism, vaccine safety. And yes, it very well could be that RFK Jr.'s intentions are pure. But the point is he's not the only one that has access to all of this stuff, and you should question that first part regardless. Kennedy has filled the agency with staffers who have a history of working at or running health technology startup businesses. So that's, is technology synonymous with health at this point? A lot of Americans don't agree with that, if not completely counter that. So it's interesting that this is the direction, guys. AI-created vaccines, technology startups, packing his inner circle. I mean, this is not a small part. It is the part. It is the direction. The new initiative would deepen the pool of information on patients for a federal government and tech companies, as if they're the same thing. Right? Because, of course, if the federal government has your health data, so too should the tech companies, as some broad statement of all tech. That's crazy to me. The way it's even listed is crazy to me. This scheme is an open door for the further use of monetization and of sensitive and personal health data. I agree. That's very strange. See, okay. Did I skip that or something? I feel like I've just skipped something. Maybe not. Okay, no, that's right. I'm just making sure that was, yeah, okay. We read that entirely. Okay, so that's just the starting point, which is, it's a big point, but the move of Trump launching a new private health tracking system with your data, which is up to you at the moment. But again, the head fake here, that you get to choose whether or not you're participating, that's a lie, guys. Palantir, who weirdly is not named in this direction, which I find near impossible with how it is immersed with all of this. Palantir is basically part of the government today. It's not my opinion. So the idea that they're doing this when it involves what they're doing, I think it's almost like it's conspicuous that they're not including them in this. But I think there's a reason. I think it's obvious. My point, though, is that the government and Palantir and other groups around that, which are a lot of their there's a lot of groups in the kind of orbit of Palantir that have access to all of your information regardless. That's already there. That's not a secret. So keeping this in mind, let's not forget RFK, this should kind of technically be after these next 2 points, but RFK Jr. already told you wearables was the direction. Now, does that align with what he's been saying before he got into power? Not really, not to me anyway. So I think that's a weird shift, but now we see why that makes sense. But maybe he believes it. And him having good intentions or wanting this or thinking it's the right thing does not then make the action good. Especially since we should be questioning whether his intentions are pure at this point for 1,000 reasons. Doesn't change his long-standing record of work he's done up until now that is still very good and still has lasting positive effects. Just be objective, guys. We shouldn't let this manipulate the way we see things. But also don't forget that Tucker Carlson recently leaned in with a wearables company. Levels. Levels is about wearables. And this is right after RFK told us this was the plan. Question all of these people, all these half a step removed corporate media people. Always hope they're changing their minds. Always hope they're seeing the bigger picture. But don't blindly take that when suddenly they step away from something and guide you into the next manipulation, which happens all too often. Excuse me. Here's RFK Jr. wants everyone to use wearables. This is an article talking about that. In case you didn't see the article, here he is saying it in a recent congressional hearing.
About their physical activity, about the way that they live their lives. We think that wearables are a key to the MAHA agenda, making America healthy again. And we are going to, my vision is that every American is wearing a wearable within 4 years.
See, it's not just the direction. Is that he makes it clear that his vision is everyone wearing them within 4 years. That is a far cry from what is, your choice and what's best for everybody. Now, he's not saying he's going to force it on everybody. Not the same thing. But the idea of that just doesn't seem consistent with what we've been showing up until now. My personal opinion, you can decide for yourself. Now, we just saw, by the way, that it'll be in line with, remember, some of these points will make much more sense when you hear our discussion coming up. But on top of everything, we just saw Donald Trump tell you that he was leaning in. Another one of these examples I made to begin with, $50 billion of investment from AstraZeneca to do what? To build infrastructure, or what does he say? Manufacturing plants and all sorts of other things. And this is the same conversation. Is that what conservatives wanted? Is that what anybody on the Republican conservative side was hoping he would do? I don't believe so, unless there are people that already knew this was the plan and it went against what the base wanted. Nobody was calling for more vaccines, let alone more vaccine manufacturing plants. But here we are, AstraZeneca. Oh, hold on. That's coming up next. Here it is.
We have a big announcement. AstraZeneca, the big drug company, is going to spend $50 billion, just announced $50 billion in the United States in order to build various places all over the country, big manufacturing plants, pharmaceutical plants all over the country, so that's an honor. And he said they did that because of the election and because of the fact that the tariffs are placed. So they're building their facilities in New York. $50 billion, that's a big investment. And it's going to be a very good investment. I have no doubt about it. So thank you to AstraZeneca.
Okay. Money, is that all that matters, right? Good. More money for the government who's doing the things you don't want. Hooray. Got to call these things out. So on top of that, which this will be more relevant for many reasons, but just again, as it is, I think it's important to highlight, which we already did throughout the COVID-19 illusion. This is a deal from 2013 for the podcast. AstraZeneca and Moderna announced exclusive agreement to develop pioneering mRNA therapeutics. That's 2013. Interesting. Now, don't forget, Robert Langer is the co-founder, the scientific co-founder of Moderna, who was one of the people working on some of the foundational research that not just was the earlier parts of what led to this, but also the stuff that I think is coming. The optogenetics, magnogenetics, nanotechnology stuff with overlapping with Charles Lieber and what they're using to go in 1,000 different directions, which we get into in the interview. But the idea of, I'm realizing I forgot to bring that up. I'll do it now in the interview. This will be in the show notes. I'm glad I remembered this because I bring it up in the interview and I forgot to grab it. And you'll remember this as you go through, but the Rockefeller study, which you showed before, as well as the Guardian article talking about the magneto injection. The point is, as usual, that this is not a secret, and it's more than one study about, this is the Rockefeller University study, but there's plenty of them about using ferritin nanoparticles through injection to be able to control the movements of mice, to be able to, in some cases or other cases, either increase or decrease your glucose levels so you could kill somebody, or you could basically relay the information coming from their their eyes. It's what it says. You can read it for yourself. Now grab this, since this is very relevant to that point I just made about the dual use. And all of these come into play with what we're talking about right now. There's so many shows we've done around this topic. This one, Dual use, new aerosolized mRNA delivering nanoparticles, and I think it's an MIT study, by the way, can vaccinate or they can eliminate. Same point. They can either create something or they can make something happen, or they can have something like a glucose level drop or an insulin level drop is what I meant to say, the insulin level. And then an insulin level dropping can kill you, right? And this is very well articulated by the study itself. All of this is where we're going with this. So the Rockefeller one you'll see as we bring it up later, but the overarching point, though, is to recognize that all of this, the point was back to Bob Langer and Charles Lieber and all the research they've been doing for a very long time, as you can see here, back 2013 anyway, and where we seem to be heading, which is where all of this stuff is leading to, as you've seen us on the show if you've been watching long enough. Save this one for you. Okay. Now, this one as well. Oh, and then I included this show, by the way. Bob Langer, the coronavirus common denominator tied to Charles Lieber. And we talk about this with Whitney Webb. Very clear how these things all come together. And it was clear a long time ago. This show's from 2020, from May 2020, guys. I mean, think about that. May 2020. We're barely into the COVID-19 illusion. And this is stuff that people still haven't come around to. As usual, but let's, tomorrow Alex Jones or Tucker Carlson will point to it and it'll become a major talking point well past the point of which it needed to be seen, which is how this tends to work. I'm sorry, I'm a skeptic when it comes to that. Okay, here's another clip that overlaps with what I was just starting to play, which is interesting, seeing as how, again, AstraZeneca in the background. And this is a clip of the CDC director, Susan Monarez, the acting director, discussing where this goes. And this is very important to see that this is all, and this is from before, right? This is the one from before. This one is during the confirmation hearing. And this is on the surface, guys. These are the people that they're choosing. And we're going to pretend like this is not going in this direction already, sprinting in this direction. Here's what she said about the direction, the mRNA overlap. And when I talk about this as the vaccine side of it, or rather injections, remember my point that this is one maybe even experimental aspect of finding out of where this is all going to be going. There's so many ways you could say it, but obviously I think we all recognize that the let's just say the evidence that suggests very strongly that what happened during COVID-19 was an experiment. Whether that was, and multifaceted, there's many different things you can see, but one of which I think was just about either nanotech, smart dust, something like that being used. And even just to the point of the nanotechnology, which is not necessarily always nanorobots, but being applied and tested, or the overlap. And that's where you come to the Internet of nanobio things, or the what Klaus Schwab continues to talk about, right? The industrial revolution and the idea that we're now at a point where those things will merge, or the bioconvergence. These things have been talked about for so long, and it's all right in front of you. So, back to her.
You can actually integrate the individual patient information, integrate it into the larger understanding of patients or individuals with symptomology similar to them that is extracted from electronic health records or from other sources of information, whether it's wearables or community health information related to various health-related social needs, social determinants of health, all those. Imagine all of that integrated. And so that when you go into a clinical care setting and you have X, Y, or Z symptomology, your clinician can understand in 5 to 10 minutes through a generative AI, through a modeling capability. We actually don't think Bob has the flu. We think Bob has something else. And it is incredibly well informed. And so Bob walks out of there knowing that his best course of treatment is going to be the next 10 things. And how he's going to get those things, because you've actually introduced him into the clinical care pathway that is most meaningful for him. Bob is going to have a much better health outcome than he would have had he had to go to a serial number of engagements in a clinical care setting and not having the right diagnosis month over month over month, potentially year over year over year, which we know happens. And so in this particular case, Bob is going to be much healthier, much more quickly than he had delayed diagnosis in a not optimal treatment regimen.
So it's obvious here where this direction is going. Now, you could always argue that these people have, that she doesn't, in any of these conversations, that people doing the research don't always have negative intentions. They may just think it can help society, and it can if done with good intentions. The problem, though, is you never know that. And what that leads to is exactly where this is all going. It's all becoming this very clear choke point, which with the best of intentions, the next person to use this massive data flow of controllable information can use it against us. And I kind of think that's already where we are. But recognize what it's saying here. This is from Sense Receptor, listing what she wrote, what she stated, wearables isn't coming from RFK Jr., it's coming from her, their statement. And then it says, if you can, and by the way, the point was, in case you missed it, she was confirmed yesterday. If you can integrate the patient with electronic health records, wearables, your doctor can see in minutes through a generative AI. So I don't know if that's, I don't want that. I don't think most people want that, to go through this AI field. Now the clip, currently acting director of CDC, is from a video posted in the, and this is posted June 24th. She's been confirmed. Is from a video posted the Hill Events YouTube channel and back in 2023. Manarez previously served as the deputy director for the Advanced Research Projects Agency for Health, or ARPA-H, which he talked about, as they already tried to do as HARPA with Trump's last administration. They just moved it, and then Biden moved the H, and it's the same thing. They want to make it look like we're not doing the same thing. It's the same damn thing. It's a DARPA for health. That's not what we should be wanting. Now it says, and that listed off, it's just an agency with the Department of Health and Human Services. Exactly, that's the best way to put it. A DARPA health direction, which is not, again, it's experimental stuff that we don't want, in my opinion. Yeah, so that's what she listed off right there in general. Now here is Dr. Jane Ruby pointing out what she said in front of, I mean, this shouldn't be new. This is what we just heard from the FDA guys. One of which, by the way, Prasad, I think, who just left. It's crazy how that keeps happening. People I'm calling for him to spill the beans about something. Well, I hope so, but usually that's not how this goes. The point is that it's interesting how many people come in and leave, maybe because they start to recognize that it's just as corrupt as it seems from the outside. Here is what she said. It's all safe and effective.
Safety of mRNA vaccine in general.
The FDA has, in the production of the COVID-19 vaccine, had approved the mRNA vaccines as safe and had demonstrated efficacy associated with them.
So you would not be prejudiced from the get-go against such a platform, such a vaccine built upon a platform, whether it's for COVID, flu, for Lyme disease, or anything else?
That is why I have no a priori prejudice against the mRNA platform or any.
And who cares that RFK said it's killing people? Who cares if the data shows that it's the worst thing we could possibly do? Who cares about all the facts, right? I have no prejudice about going forward with a direction that nobody wants. Apparently not even Democrats, but who cares? Why does that make sense to anybody?
Any other approach that is being taken to develop vaccines, and that is why we have safety and efficacy standards that the FDA puts in place for any of these medical product trials to ensure that anything that is being developed, we can have the confidence that we can put it in ourselves and our children, our family members.
Yeah, well, except for the fact that there's numerous examples, I mean, far more than numerous, of things like that going to pass and being used and then turning out to be super dangerous. So even with if you want to pretend that they always have the best of intentions, they still make mistakes. So then you add the reality that we're now talking about something that the whole world seems to recognize is not safe. There's countries now that are pushing back on whether it should even be used, and they're going, no worries, we already made sure it's safe and effective. So that's why we're going to keep going in this direction. And the good old FDA that's been showing itself over the last so many years to be completely corrupt, completely inept, and the guy who just stepped in claiming to save it, one of them, that just already left, doesn't really ring with the best endorsement right now. But I think you already know why. I think you already know why. We're being lied to. That's my opinion. Now, here's just one of the shows we did about a peer-reviewed study that found that the platform itself, the mRNA platform, so hypothetically, or not even hypothetically, like a Stargate platform, same thing, that itself was what's driving myocarditis. That's the one study. It's not just one thing, by the way. And let's not forget that Ralph Barrick worked on spreading myocarditis from coronavirus. If you don't remember that, it's amazing the kind of things that we've researched and found, and that so few people seem to know. Which one was this? U.S. funded research on coronavirus-induced myocarditis. I've got his worksheet down here directly from University of Carolina, Chapel Hill. It lists it right there in the 90s. Working to make coronavirus and spread myocarditis, or rather, the other way around. And then this one was about, did they work on a myocarditis-inducing virus? Yes. And then work to aerosolize it? Also, yes, in the case of China. All public information. I had a great interview with Dr. David Martin about similar things, and same thing. Absolutely. I mean, shockingly obvious what this is actually about. I'll include that too. The whole point of all of this is that this research is not even necessarily only about health, guys. If you could even argue that even the weaponized idea of it is not about health, but it goes so far beyond that too. And that's where this is really about right now. So Orwell points out a little reminder about these wearables, which they say is under the guise of health. Article below in comments. The point is about the insurance overlap to all of this. And that's coming up next. Actually, this is the one about spying. The Alexa and Fitbit can testify against you in court. But see, you guys all know this because you watch this show, because you follow us, you already know this information. But now talk about everyone in the country wearing wearables. Well, this just becomes one more example of not just spying when it comes to what you're saying, researching, but what your heart rate is, right? What scares you? What makes you, any number of the biometric overlaps, right? Reading your heart rate, your sweat, everything. And that's not something, if you read their own research, that's something that is very important to them. And here's just the same Kennedy clip from the wearables. Include this interview. Oh, and then I want to play this as well. And then this is what I was mentioning. So this is Orwell's post, and she's saying they are coming for your parents and grandparents first with this digital ID wearable nightmare and making it free, of course. And that's the post is Fitbit covered by Medicare. And I think that's I highlighted it and forgot why. I'm thinking that's why in the first article about the Medicare, Medicaid, that this will be forced on people like that to get discounts and so on. But it says insurance companies have been gearing up for this in recent years, bringing wearables under the guise that health and wellness, providing deep discounts. Well, there you go. And in some cases, free products. All insurance companies have an option for this. Those convenient telehealth appointments of 2022, we're selling our private information to big tech without your consent, as always, guys, and get ready for that. Oopsie, again, it's kind of embarrassing to those that keep thinking like they mean what they say when they never seem to follow through with anything they say. And then it said, did this give them a head start of gobbling up private health data? Yeah, I agree with that. But this I'm going to play before we jump into the last part of this segment, which overlaps with the nano cage being built around us. But I thought this was relevant to play. This was a clip that Jason Bassler did around a show that we put out. And this was posted. Oh, that's the article right there, in fact. March 30th, 2024. So here's a 6-minute clip of basically the list of the nano wearable direction that it's all going in. And this is what he wrote. In our latest Spotlight segment, we analyzed a list of the top 10 wearable and implantable technologies expected to become reality in the future. This is just the beginning of what they have in store, and there's so much more to uncover. What I found really fascinating. This is an article from WT Box, but this actually been kind of widely reposted. I just happened to see it on this website first. And each one of them come along with links and stuff you can check out. But it says, implantable wearables, top 10 implantables soon to be in your body. 2023 from May. And these pictures are creepy too, by the way. And see, even that's a huge clunky microchip in comparison to what we're really at the stage of right now, right? But it says in the future, the smart sensors and implantable wearables, I think so. Well, let's talk about basically what they're saying these things are what are coming, right? So this is a projected smartphone. Well, it's not too alarming just yet, but the idea being that it's one step removed. Now it's just a band on your wrist until eventually, you lose the band, like he's saying, and then okay, well, don't worry. We've got something you can just put a little sensor inside your hand, and the screen pops up on your wrist, which, by the way, has already been displayed on plenty of futuristic movies. You just pop the thing on your hand, and the screen comes on your skin, right? We've all seen it. And you may not be harmed by that. My point is this is all about predictive programming, and we shouldn't be allowing or wanting or justifying implantable electronic devices without fully understanding or caring about what that will do, what that will create. There's different things, right? Creating, my point is about the way that these things will be used to control you. They can be shut off. They can be dictated. They can be hacked. But on top of that, how will they be used? What will they do? Or rather, the second one, how will these things can have detrimental health effects that they don't care about. Look at 5G. Look at nanotechnology in general. All these things are shown to have serious effects. They don't even care. They're not even researching these things right now. They're rushing forward with their technological future at your expense, just like the gene therapies they forced on everybody, which again, we now know that they chose that direction, not because it was the best, not because it was the safest, but because it was what they wanted. That's now an open discussion. Now, they still argue that it's the best thing for everybody. They're still standing by that. But when that was the case, they were admitting that this was an untested concept. It was an experimental concept. They're arguing in the broader sense, whether they believe it or not, that it's the best for future societies. But we had to test it on the people that are all dying right now, right? So we'll get there. It's the long-term best future. Well, I don't even know if they believe that. My point is, all of these things have detrimental side effects that they're not testing for. Here is healing chipsets, which is just this we've talked about this already. Scientists in London are developing swallowable capsule circuits that monitor fat levels or God knows what else and relays information and, could potentially do something inside of you, kill you. These things are always considering this. Like, what was the one we talked about? The dual use. Oh, it was the, let's see, aerosolized. Yep, there it is. Also a very real concept, which is, this is kind of jumping ahead, we're going to get to, but this popped into my head just now. Just the idea of dual use. Now, this was a very real, high-level conversation, which I don't think I'll be able to grab it up here. And these nanoparticles can deliver mRNA, right? They essentially vaccinate you, or they can turn off your body systems, or whatever the claim they made. It was very clear, right? So we're talking about these swallowable capsule circuits. Just think about the same thing. That's how these work, or can. Cyber pills connected to your doctor. Same concept in a slightly different angle. Implantable birth control pills. This is where it's all going, guys. Smart tattoos. Now realize, as much as they're pointing like this is in the future, all of these things are currently real and are happening and are even being used. They're just not mass adopted yet in many cases. Smart tattoos. That kind of overlaps with the first point. Brain-computer interfaces, which again, I actually even argue that the whole concept of wireless connection, I think they even mentioned in this display, I think that's a red herring. I think we're way past that. When like magnetogenetics, optogenetics, that's the cutting edge that I think they're working on. I think this is sort of a means to an end, or even just not to make you think that's where we're at. I don't know. Meltable bio batteries. Smart dust, which was my larger point right there. The thing that we're not supposed to acknowledge is actually real. And it says, with smart dust, doctors will be able to act inside your body without opening you, and information could be stored inside you, which is one of the real things that are already happening. Perhaps the most startling of current implantable innovations is smart dust. It's an array of full computers with antennas, each smaller than a grain of sand, way smaller than that. In fact, the grains can organize themselves inside the body into smart networks and power a whole range of complex. Yeah, I've been screaming about this for a decade. People still pretend like this isn't real. She's not saying this is what is going to happen in 40 years. It's what is already going on. It's been happening for 20. It says, imagine swarms of these nano devices called motes attacking every cancer cell, or killing you, or doing any number of other manipulative things for the benefit of your government, or whatever else we're talking about. It's amazing that we disregard things like that, despite how often the government acts just like that. 3D printed smart organs, or, printed meat, or printed any number of things they're pushing on you. The verified self. Yeah, an implantable thing we're talking about. And of course, showing you this gigantic chip that's way, way, way in the past. But it says implantables hammer against social norms by raising privacy issues. But it says to a potential dystopia. I always love the lip service, but let's ignore that and talk about the fun things. That's what they're doing. Last but not least, on top 10 implantable wearables soon in your body, the verified self tech could be used to ID every single human being in the world. Does any human actually want that? Why does that even sound like what benefit anybody but an authoritarian government? The U.S. military already has a program. Of course they do. That's how it starts. Been doing this for a while, right? This is stuff we've been on this topic, rather, So here's the overlap again, back to the nanotech, element of this that goes back a long time, which intersected with the COVID-19 timeframe. This is the Harvard. I've shown this many times. This is from 2010, Harvard Magazine, and it's Charles Lieber. Chemist Charles Lieber and his colleagues have developed a nanoscale transistor so small it can enter, probe, and communicate with cells without harming them. 2010, 2011. Think about that. And the main point was, again, this innovation is important because if it indicates when a man-made structure, the size of a virus, they're claiming, or whatever you want to compare it to that's that size, made structure, it says, indicates that when a man-made structure is as small as a virus or bacteria, it can behave the way biological structures do. And at that point, even from a philosophical point, what's the difference at that point? And this is where we are and where we were. I mean, think about the overlap to all of this, as well as another thing, by the way, that I forgot to grab during the show, the interview, which you'll be seeing after this if you're turning in late. This is, and it's a patent. And yes, the understanding the point that patents don't prove something exists, but it does prove that there's interest in it and that the people have gone through and put money and time into having some kind of a viable presentation to put this forward. And this, again, is about things that we can already prove in other cases are existing. But I just think it's fascinating. This is Wells Fargo. I mentioned it in the interview, which they refer to as micro electromechanical systems, or MEMS, i.e. smart dust. And this is literally about having this stuff come out of like a ATM and using smart dust be able to verify who you are as a person, or like through biometrics and whatever else. It's just insane. And this is from, I mean, this patent goes all the way to 2037, but it was done in 2016. Very important. So to the digital twin aspect of this, which I think is, I mean, I bring this up a lot, because it's something that I feel of all of this, even, I mean, the topic itself doesn't get much attention, but beyond that, even those that talk about it seem to, this is something that doesn't really get fleshed out enough, in my opinion. And it is almost, I guess, from the predictive aspect of it, one of the most concerning. And I'm going to read you something about this that's very important. But remember that all of this, the wearable, these are steps, just like the phone and everything before it. You know, these are incremental steps about leading you into, which is the overlap, which we're going to get into in the interview, the biological kind of the genetic medicine of the like the COVID injections and that overlap within it. And the idea that it's driving us to this position to just have, like Larry Ellison from Stargate program and Oracle and Trump's connection, they're literally telling you personalized, genetically modified, AI-driven medicine. Sounds like a nightmare to me, and most Republicans probably agree, but they're driving it forward for you. But let's talk about this digital twin aspect. This is something I saw today. It's Bersay Mesco, probably mispronouncing that, MD, PhD. He says digital twins, I believe it's a he. Yeah, digital twins represent one of the least practical, understandable concepts of digital health and AI, which is likely why people aren't talking about it. He says you can see a sensor or wearable providing data. You can see the results of a study analyzing how a certain AI can contribute to healthcare. But how do you demonstrate digital twins so everyone can understand what they are about? This new study doesn't solve that, but definitely plays a role. The Human Phenotype Project collected extensive, in-depth medical information from over 13,000 people. You can see the sources of this data in the figure. And this is the overlapping figure showing you kind of like it's exactly what it sounds like. It's a digital version of you, but not just like a data set. It is an acting, living, algorithmic controlled AI, if you will, version of you that goes about your day in some kind of SimCity ecosystem. At least that's one version of how this works. And so that way you can use it to predict. Imagine that on a national scale. So they've got a data point, or rather an algorithm playing out you or every other person in this entire country in a real-time 3D map of this country where people are going about their lives like a SimCity map. But with every data point you've ever put into the system your entire life. And everything, every word I'm saying right now adds to what my thing does in that. This is not a joke. And the reality is, through those, they can, to a very high percentage, predict what we will do as a society, predict what, one state will do in an election. Like, these are not jokes, guys. So he lists this right here, but we'll read it as we go through it, which is important. It's very interesting. So this you will find very alarming and interesting at the same time. Meet your digital twin. This AI model can predict your future health, among many other things they claim, and help you change it. Using the massive database of the Human Phenotype Project, Weizmann researchers aim to predict disease before it strikes. July 15, 2025. It's very new. Now, not that it's happening new, but we're being shown that it, as a new thing, but it's not new. Recently, researchers from Professor Aaron Siegel's laboratory at Weizmann Institute of Science have harnessed artificial intelligence to create a personalized digital twin that allows them to detect a risk of developing diseases, initiate preventative treatment, and even run simulations to predict which treatment will be most effective. Yeah, I mean, that's like the Neuralink, make your arms work again. I guarantee those seem to be that makes sense with what it's possible to, what it can do. But what else can it do? Well, every dystopian, everything you take anything, anytime a power structure takes a hold of something, anytime a government it will be used against you. This is not my opinion. If we're too naive to recognize our own history, that's on us. The history will show you, not just the U.S., anywhere. It's RFK would, here, I think I even have this still. would tell you this before he was in power. And he'll probably say it now in some context, but remember, this is what he said.
My father told me when I was a child, people in authority lie.
Simple. And he goes on to accentuate the point, right? They lie to you. Like, if you give them power, they'll never give it back. He said these things many times because they're true. The point is, this kind of information flow about you, and because we've mostly given this freely, but realize there are important data points. One, that they gained from Doge, the kind of illusion of all that was, to scrape all this data, to remove the silos and allow Israel access to it, all of it very real. That was one part, but I think there are elements of this that are still being scooped, still being, driven toward. I think that's important to think about. So this is not just about health, at least in somebody's mind. It's about control. It's about surveillance. It is about influencing action. Now, it goes on to say, before the Human Genome Project was launched in 1990, think about that, to explore the fundamental question of what makes each of us who we are. Now, that's different. That's the Human Genome Project. Most of you are familiar with that, but just knowing this direction of like mapping these things out, which is why I started with that clip, and we'll play that going through this, the whole corporation clip about patenting life. I'm telling you that there's been an element of this the entire time, if not the driving force, eugenics. To explore the fundamental question of what makes each of us who we are, only a fraction of human genes were known to science. Today, however, it says, it is clear that genes alone provide only a partial picture. Aha. So now you see there's more to the picture that they need to scoop up, not for benefiting any of us, I would argue, but for what they're trying to accomplish through all of this. Many of the characteristics that define us and the diseases that threaten us are linked to environmental factors. The community of microorganisms residing in our bodies, our microbiome, the aging process, and other factors. It says, when we launched the project in Israel in 2018, our initial goal was 10,000 participants. Okay. Just because something's in Israel doesn't make it inherently bad, but realize every point right now of all of this stuff leads back to the Zionist government. It's not a secret. That's why I'm talking about the idea of what this globalist, Zionist, technocrat kind of agenda right now. They're all intertwined. It's not my opinion. You can see it. So what's interesting to me is that this wasn't just Israel. There's plenty of other elements involved, but to see how this is always tied back and to find that all of this, remember during COVID-19, they called it Pfizer's lab. There was a clear element of what they were trying to accomplish here. Now, my opinion, the broader point is it's not just Israel. Clearly, you have the other governments involved, but to recognize that they're playing a leading role in what's currently happening to you through the Trump administration, my opinion, but look at the facts, guys, and to know that they're doing so with a government that is brazenly, proudly committing genocide in front of the world. And we'll go over more of that. I mean, guys, we just went over the former Green Beret, the different people from World Food Program. There's 4 or 5 different people saying we watched them open fire on children. We watched them execute starving people. That's just one day out of an endless string of years and years, well before October 7th. The point, though, is to recognize how concerning this is when you have this genomic sort of health surveillance panopticon of dystopian future bearing down on you because Israel is leading a role in all of this. That should concern us, especially as we'll get to in a second, how these things are applied in far more dangerous ways using this information, like genetic bioweapons, not a secret. But it says to deepen our understanding of ethnic, environment, and cultural variations. Yes, not just for health, helping those people stay healthy, but to manipulate the vulnerabilities through this kind of direction. And that's not everything all the time. But if you can't recognize throughout history with these very governments that they'll always make that case for safety, of course, right? To fight off the evil villains, of course, right? Just like the making dangerous bioweapons to just in case, hardly. This research has led to the creation of an advanced database that is not only extensive, but also represents the most in-depth collection of human data currently in existence. And that's what Israel's leading up. Well, the Genome Project from 2018, but realize, or rather, to 1990, but this project extending from that, the Digital Twin Project starting in 2018 being led by Israel. And that's the most in-depth collection of human data currently in existence, except now you add to that they have access to the entire country's all-encompassing data of all kinds. Sure makes you feel good. It says, still the most significant promise of the Human Phenotype Project lies in its potential to advance personalized or precision medicine. Yes, that's what Larry Ellison was telling you. Researchers aim to achieve this through a unified computer model that will integrate all the information collected from each participant in the project, creating a digital twin of that person. Now, remember, they're talking about their own focused version of this. That is not, I mean, this is not, I've talked about open discussion. The governments are doing this. Open discussions, research. I mean, this is not a 10,000 model focused, we'll do it in the future. They already have all this information. So if you actually believe, and you're going to tell yourself that these governments, with all the times they've lied to you and done things without your permission, that they're going to suddenly wait for this monumental thing to make sure you all agree to it, I got a bridge to sell you. It goes on to say, this model currently under development in a project led by doctoral student Guy Lutzker will predict what medical events the participant is likely to experience in the future and how best to prevent them. Medical pre-crime. How long have we been talking about that? Now, just to reiterate, in case that was unclear, I'm giving you my opinion. I can't know for sure that this is what but it's, are they doing it in other contexts? That is yes. But is it an all-encompassing government? I don't know. I think the evidence based on their past actions and the precedents they've set, as we're always talking about, are very clear, but we'll have to wait and see what happens or what we find out they've been doing the entire time. But you know as well as I that everything that we've ever seen of these governments suggests to you that we should be very on guard about where this goes. It says to train the model. Oh, again, the point about predictive medicine, not just about what you might have, but how they can prevent it, right? So at what point, like we saw during COVID from both sides of the false binary, that they go, well, we need to give this to everybody because we're all going to die if we don't, right? But how do we know that? Or they say we're about to have a pandemic. We got to do something before it comes around. Thank God we gave you all those shots because it would have been worse or it might have happened. How do you ever know? Again, if you don't think they're capable of that, I don't think you're paying attention. Now it says to train the model, the scientists let it study the medical records of each participant and then ask it to make minor predictions. A specific piece of information is withheld each time, and the model is tasked with predicting it based on the existing data. This training approach helps create a generative AI model that can predict medical events, and in the future is expected to construct an entire personalized health trajectory, outlining a person's future health status years in advance. Right? I mean, at what point is that something that's not up to you anymore? If they say we're all going to, predictive model shows this whole country is going to get you get the point. It's the same thing. That will be used in some cases, possibly good intention, but with a bad outcome, or by governments that know they're lying because they want to control you. We already know how this works. Such predictions help prevent disease or delay it at an early stage. Same point, just the predictive element of it. Quote, we are living in an era of incredible rapid change. The realms of health and medicine will undergo dramatic transformations in the coming years because increasingly AI-driven. Becoming. Well, we have a choice about that, but they're not letting you choose right now. So I find that really concerning. Both the digital twin point we're always bringing up, but the fact that this major program that they're now pointing to for the direction of Donald Trump's, the point is, guys, this is starting in Israel and overlap with the people, like the worst possible people you can think to put this in the hands of. And I'm talking about Zionist Israeli government, Zionist U.S. government, nothing more than that, despite what people would love to insert because they want to stop you from understanding how important this is. Here's the study, if you want to read the study itself, July 15th, 2025, Deep Phenotyping of Health Disease Continuum in the Health Phenotype Project. Now, we talked about the Great Reset never stopping in the last show we did, July 26, 2025, as well as Maxwell's limited immunity, which I believe is just like we predicted. I get the sense that it's going to go full and there's going to be some kind of a deal made. We'll see how that goes. Congress seems to have already turned it down, by the way. We'll come to that in the future show. But I think it's going to happen with Trump's administration, which was always the plan. Personal opinion, Palantir's Hollywood takeover. We talk about that briefly today in the interview, but the Great Reset never stopped. So that is, we just talked about, also overlapping with Israel, the bioconvergence. That's why I showed the article. That's what this comes from. Bioconvergence, the next big thing from Israel. It's not hard to see where these things seem to be stemming from, guys. And this is a recent article. So this is where it's going. Or not, not recent, but not old. This is from, what was it, a couple years ago? I forget what the date was. But we talked about it in the context of the last show. Read it. We'll go through it in depth on that show if you want to check it out. The point was, this is what they were telling you was the big future thing. And remember, in 2002, a massive document that the U.S. government was a part predicted that they would alter the human species with nanotechnology in 20 years. And that's where we are now. Now, many of the things can be done in this direction, right? Not just the gene-focused, gene editing they want to call medicine. But the idea that what they're talking about can be dual use, as we already showed you. And this is just to include this because it's such an interesting kind of arc of all this. Remember, RFK Jr. came out and said this in an interview that everybody lost their minds about. Brian Krassenstein here calls him racist, or even though you're citing actual peer-reviewed studies that so whether you believe it or not, the point is it's a study that it does exist, and he's not making this up. But I'll play this really quickly so you can hear what he had to say, or maybe I didn't grab it. No, it looks like I didn't, so we'll just skip it. The point was RFK Jr. in this, if you remember, made the point. He says the people who are most immune, that it was simply the study that showed that the COVID-19, whatever it was, specifically two types of people were most immune to it because they had a specific gene, and that was the Ashkenazi Jew population and the Amish. The study's right here. We included it so you can read it for yourself. Now that's you can read that however you'd like. A peer-reviewed study found that was the case based on the genetics, period. Now, of course, you could argue that means that those two or one of them somehow made this happen, and you should consider that question. But we can't prove that. And there was new insights into genetic susceptibility of COVID-19 and ACE2 and TMPRSS2 polymorphism analysis. So the point was that he brought this up in the interview and basically said, look, there's examples of this, and pointed to the study. Then said in a totally different point that there are governments like China who are working towards ethnic bioweapons. All of that is very true, in addition to the fact that so too is Israel. And this is a very public story. Look it up. We're working towards ethnic bioweapons with the apartheid South Africa that they created. It's all very public. So I just simply said, does this guy bother to even do the most basic due diligence before he falls all over himself to promote the mainstream narrative, which was Brian? Here is the peer-reviewed study that says near exactly what RFK said, which gets, even below this, you get so much pushback of people claiming that, well, it's accurate, but you misrepresented what he said. It's just this, people lose their minds about this stuff. Well, here he is today driving us in the same direction, it seems. But the point was, Derek did an article about this, the truth within RFK Jr.'s statements about ethnic targeted weapons. This is real, guys. And so here's a clip that I also posted in the same context, backing up the same thing about what RFK said. That it says, now there are weapons that are designed to target specific people. It says you can actually take someone's DNA, target a biological weapon that will kill them. And I said, but I thought the entirety of mainstream media just got done telling us this was anti-Semitic. Interesting. The point is, guys, this is a major part of where this goes. And Israel, as we just showed you, seems to be leading the charge. So if you know, as we can prove in history, that this is something that they have worked on, that they are involved with, and even the COVID-19 discussion shows that Ashkenazi Jews in particular had a resistance to it, it's worth an educated person will consider that obviously lines up. Not that it proves anything, not that therefore then we can assume everything else, but it's like, okay, there's very much something to be considered here. And so it's not just about Israel, but any of them, the US, the UK, working on this with all the information they have. The point, though, is that Israel has already tried this in the past, has already been working toward this, probably never stopped. So now that you can see that in 2018, they started the project that created the digital twins, that they're scooping up genetic data from all over this country, from all over the world. They let Pfizer treat their country as a lab, which is where they gathered all that information. Come on. It's very much worth your time to consider that this is where we're going, if not already are.
To be clear, I think one of the things we're talking about here is that there are now weapons under development and developed that are designed to target specific people. Right, that's what this is, where you can actually take someone's DNA, take their medical profile, and you can target a biological weapon that will kill that person or take them off the battlefield.
And for the podcast, this is military, right? This is the Aspen Security Forum, but he's sitting right next to, I believe it's a general. But the point is, not hypothetical, not some fringe discussion.
Make them inoperable. That will kill that person or take them off the battlefield or make them inoperable. So you can't have a discussion about this without talking about privacy and commercial data and the protection of commercial data, because...
Did you hear that? Well, guess what just got taken from you? The protection of commercial data that they just scooped up from every possible source and are now that Israel has access to, that they just remove the silos for everything. I just think that's shocking that this is, listen to what he says.
And commercial data in the protection of commercial data, because expectations of privacy have degraded over the last 20 years. Young folks actually have very little expectation of privacy. That's what the polling and the data show. And people will very rapidly spit into a cup and send it into 23andMe and get really interesting data about their background. And guess what? Their DNA is now owned by a private company and can be sold off with very little intellectual property protection or privacy protection. And we don't have legal and regulatory regimes to deal with that. So we have to have an open and public discussion, and this is going to have to be a political discussion about what does the protection of healthcare information, DNA information, and your data look like, because that data is actually going to be procured and collected by our adversaries for the development of these systems.
Oops. Yeah, oops. Or your own government, guys. Head fake. It's going to be China and they're going to do it. No, well, I guess I'm kind of double making the point since we're talking about Israel too. But realize that your government is either completely overtaken, so they're not even involved in the decision, or that they're letting this happen. And that it's the commercial data that we literally just saw a fire sale. Trump just let them take it all. And let's not make it about Trump alone. It's not. Trump is just one more person in the line of whatever thing. It's the same direction from the same group playing you as a partisan game. I mean, the reality is I don't think Trump and Biden are the same thing. I think they have different opinions. But if you look, as I've always said about the continuing agendas, the ones that really matter, not the wedge issues that don't really ever change, but kind of oscillate back and forth. The reality is clearly it's always been the same direction. Maybe they don't know that. Again, we don't have a crystal ball. We don't know everything. Nobody does. The point, the only thing you have as always is the actions, the precedent that has been set, and the outcome. And if you look at those things and stop being, falling into the partisan narrative game, it's obvious what's happening. And again, that doesn't mean everyone's knowing they're involved with it, but the action, the outcome, that's what matters. He just told you. And now we're here. So yeah, we can worry about China making ethnic bioweapons, but the group that seems to have the access to the information that would be needed to do it, your supposed allies. So here is the one of the releases. I believe they already had this meeting. This is from today. And the point was when I started this, or I think right when it might have already just ended when we started, but we were starting the research that hadn't happened yet. And so they apparently have had their kind of meeting. More might have come out since then, but here was just a list in regarding Trump and his big tech surveillance health data kind of agenda and what was laid out, which you already got most of it from the first part. But it says today, the Trump administration announced progress toward building a smarter, more secure, and more personalized healthcare experience in partnership with innovative private sector companies. Like all the groups the Republicans have been calling out for 4 years, but now it's okay. And that's only a knock on the people that are team sport politics. Plenty of you are showing the integrity to call this out. It's all over the place. In fact, I'm starting to think it's the majority, but as usual, I'll jump ahead on that and we'll see how it plays out. But I'm not just making things up. With COVID-19, it's very clear to me early on that it wasn't partisan. And I think that's proven to be correct. Same with Israel. But in case you're new to this, the point is in the show, not that there's not a slant. There's always a slant, right? It leans one way or the other, but not that it's, all of them think this way, all that way. It's usually somewhere in the middle. And it's, and like right now, you can see that most conservatives are not in line with the Israeli agenda of the current administration. I think that's very clear. But the team sport politics people at the top, the screaming influencers clapping like seals will go along with whatever they say. And the big shows will point to them as if that's what all Republicans think. It's just not the truth. But it goes on to say, during a White House this is what it was called, make health tech great again. Is that what you want? Come on, MAGA. Is this what you guys at Maha? Anybody? Is that what you were calling for? That AI drugs and tech wearables? This is not what we were promised. And the event hosted with the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, because this is going to be forced on people. I'm convinced of that. In the context of coercion, not necessarily like with COVID-19. The administration secured commitments from major healthcare and information technology firms, Amazon, Anthropic, Apple, Google, OpenAI. That seems like the exact opposite of what people were asking for, to begin laying the foundation for next generation digital health ecosystem that will improve patient outcomes, so they tell us, reduce provider burden, so they claim, and drive value for them. For decades, quote, Democrats and entrenched interests buried health data and blocked patients from taking control of their health. You could frame it like that, RFK Jr. speaking for HHS, or you could argue it was about keeping your data private. But yeah, see, if you frame it like, these companies wanted to keep it secret for them, make it sound like, no, we should make it free for everybody. What are we talking about here? For decades, bureaucrats and entrenched interests buried health data and blocked patients from taking control of their health. I mean, it's not an unfair statement, but the way that you're talking about access to people's data. I don't know if is there a movement out there calling for this stuff to be out there for everybody? Which is kind of where this goes. It says that ends today. We're tearing down digital walls. No, you're not. You're building digital walls. This is just kind of an illusory point, especially since you're talking about digital IDs in this conversation. You're talking about digital biometric literal walls around the country. But it says returning power to patients. I don't know how in any way this turns power into your hands. In fact, it leaves it now. Digital aspects aren't something you can store in a safe at home or put inside of a file cabinet. You can lose your connection to these things pretty easily. So it feels like the opposite to me with the illusion of control and rebuilding a health system that serves the people. This is how we make America healthy again. Tech. Just like we told you, AI and tech, that's what they're pointing to. We already just told you that his key inner circle people are all tech, whatever the way they framed it, people in that direction. The administration's efforts focus on two broad areas: promoting CMS interoperability framework to easily and seamlessly share information between patients and providers, and increasing the and realize the point, guys, is that means all providers. You don't get to choose. It's accessible to people in that field. At least that's how it's being set up right now. We'll have to see how it really comes to pass. And increasing the availability of personalized tools so that patients have the information and resources they need to make better health decisions. Well, it's your health information. Like, it's interesting. It's as if you don't know, like you need access to their thing to gain your own. I mean, I guess they're making it out to be the predictive models that we tell you you're going to get sick. In addition, 30 companies pledge to promote real health outcomes with technology. See, that's with technology over the coming months. The new tools will use digital identity credentials to obtain medical records. Right. So again, just, are we just getting digital ID is an okay thing now? We're just moving on from the fact that they're forcing digital IDs on everybody with real ID, which, yes, is happening. It has already been put, that despite people you'll hear in the interview later saying that that's not the case. Neither one of us, by the way, but clearly lies spinning around all of this stuff. Digital ID is front and center in all of this, and this is just one more way to make this the case. A full list of companies who have currently pledged their support for CMS's health tech ecosystem innovation can be found here. Now, here's the page that it gives you. It comes up like this, but you can click through some of them and look at providers and so on. And, Amazon, CVS, United Health Group, which is on most of them, Anthropic, Microsoft, OpenAI. Don't know why this is what people think they want, if that's the case at all. But last point on this before we get to the interview, Oz Integrity pointed this out. This is from today. Breaking: Australia's digital ID and human verification system to facilitate labor's e-safety laws will see most of that verification go through Israeli firm Authentics. Yeah, the Israeli intelligence firm, which is what it is. That right this moment, Twitter is still using, despite Musk's claim, 6 months ago, that they wouldn't use it anymore. They still do. I just proved it, I think, a couple weeks ago. So this is not a hypothetical secret, like an actual Israeli intelligence connected company that is now taking your biometric data. It says it right on the Twitter points I've shown you in the past. You click on it, it says, accept, that's the word they use, accept that Authentics will be taking your biometric data to verify, which they don't need to verify you for Twitter. So ask yourself why they're doing that. Doesn't make any sense. And they say they can store it for up to 30 days, which we know means forever. They wouldn't even need to put that, quite frankly. They keep it anyway, as far as I'm concerned. But now you've got Australia with not just some side thing for a platform, but their digital ID human verification system for Australia using an Israeli intelligence app that is scooping up your biometric data. They put alongside your digital twin and your genetic data. Why is this okay with anybody? He says Authentic cites creating digital twins for biometric digital identification. It's right there. No, not comfortable with that. So Israel is literally telling you that they're going to be creating digital twins, Authentics, which is Israel's intelligence apparatus, and they're going to be making digital twins with the information they take from your signing in for anything in Australia. This couldn't be more obvious, guys. We are watching this thing take things over while it is literally committing genocide and damn near collapsing in front of us. This is insane. He says, remember the pushback here on Twitter? Right, this one censored man called it out. I don't know why he doesn't anymore. I tried to show him that Authentics is still being used. He's the one that also pointed out the CHEQ that Twitter worked with, which was basically it is an Israeli company, but basically a bot company that just flooded the thing with bots while pretending to stop them. It's all very, very obvious. So watch it. Hear this show. Check it all out, guys. It just couldn't be more clear. So I'm going to give you the interview now with 7Cs. Let me know if you appreciated the difference today, if you want this to be more common. I can't promise it'll always be set up like this, but there's something interesting about being able to set some things up before watching the interview. But it's a great conversation. I hope you will stay tuned to the end and listen, because we go into a lot of important things. And if you have listened so far, man, is this going to be entertaining and insightful, because we go over a lot of things that are bolstering or bolstered by what we just went through. So I'm not going to end right now because I'm feeling like I want to say thank you and see you next time, but stay tuned. You'll see we'll check with you at the end. We'll check out at the end, and, make sure you're always, right now, since I've got you in the middle, share the content, guys, share the link, get this out there, help support TLAV, because constantly being shut down, constantly being attacked, plenty more coming your way. Oh, and damn it, I didn't want to skip past this. I'm going to follow up when I get more information. I didn't have a time to look into it today, but James Corbett reached out to me about something going on with the donation app that we use. And it seems like there might've been some grabbing of email addresses. I'm going to touch base with him and get this. I think he's going to put out a post about it, but it's of course, right? Of course, both of us are using this to try to circumvent other things. And now there's elements that are trying to, through the apps, it feels like everything we try to use to, it's all under attack or trying to hurt us or make us pull, because people like James and I, if there's some kind of an issue, we'll change and we'll do something new. Problem is that'll guarantee dramatically reduce the already dwindling revenue that we're getting from this stuff. And so it just feels coordinated, guys. But the reason I brought it up is because I wanted you to hear that. So it's with the Give WP app or the plugin, but I'll give you more information as I find out, and I'll share it from James Corbett. But it appears to be something like that email addresses were grabbed and added to a spam thing, which it's just infuriating. It never stops. And this is the digital world we're trying to get away from, guys. It just never, anyway, the point is keep fighting. They're always coming after us from every possible angle, and I will have more information coming for you on that. But enjoy the interview, support 7Cs, check out his work, and I'll see you guys next time. Welcome to the Last American Vagabond. In studio today, I have 7Cs here joining me to discuss Palantir, technocracy, all the craziness of the world today, and whatever else we decide to get into. So thank you for being here today, brother. It's good to see you.
Thanks for having me, man. Always a pleasure.
Well, it's nice to have you in the local area, so we can just be like, just come in and have a chat. Let's talk about the craziness going on.
Absolutely.
Never ceases, But so today I had some thoughts on some things we can get into that I thought were super interesting. Again, as always, I'll include his links and information so you guys can check it out. He's always doing some really interesting kind of what do they call it? Whiteboarding? Is that what do you refer to
mind
as?
mapping?
Mind mapping.
Yeah.
Okay. Why don't you touch on that? Like what do you do in that field and why you think that's important for people? Because there's it's always important to show these connections, but as you've talked about last time, people give you pushback for highlighting connections like that's not important, even though it obviously is. So go ahead.
Yeah. So I realized that as I started digging into stuff and sort of making this my career, that as I would go through various articles and stuff, it was very hard to keep in context all of the different connections between people. You would have a word wall and I'd be reading it, but in my head, it's I'm just focused on this isolated thing. And so I started digging into Peter Thiel, and I was like, this is way too much for me to keep up in my head. He owns too many companies. He seeded too many companies. So I just started mapping it out, and very quickly realized that, it serves as an excellent visualization. And I think that is something that is largely missing a lot of the time, especially when you are trying to do an all-encompassing web, infographics and stuff will usually have short, sweet, to the point stuff.
Right.
But really having this visual that people can explore and contribute to even. My live stream chats and stuff, people are constantly always dropping me I probably learn something every time I go live.
I love it. I mean, that's the open source investigation idea, because we're immersed in this, but somebody may, fresh eyes and so on, any number of things they may pick up on. And so it's it's a map of influence, which is very important to think about. Derek wrote an article about the acolytes in, Peter Thiel acolytes in the current administration, the kind of Curtis Yarvin philosophy that drives them all, and so as always, it's not necessarily to say that because they're connected, therefore they're guilty, but just that it matters to see the amount of influence. And we know today with these billionaires and technocrats, I mean, in any sphere of influence, when they're that powerful and that rich and that, they can apply this influence should they want to. So it is important to remember who they could influence should they want to, Very important.
When it comes to like the pattern of connections, it's always impossible to like prove intent because we can't read people.
Right.
Well, we can't.
Unless they say it out loud, and even then they could be lying, right?
Exactly.
You never know.
Like when we go into court, it's still just like a jury of your peers that guess whether or not you had intent.
Pretty much. Yeah.
And so then all we have to rely on is a pattern of behaviors. And it's like, okay, well, if these people are associated with 5 to 6 things that are extremely dystopian, I have no choice but to assume that that's sort of in their agenda and those are the things they support, wittingly or not.
Right. But then the point being is that that's based on research and continuing, but not that we would go, we know for sure that person is guilty, but rather just that, you're interconnected with this. My point would be that, obviously somebody could not be aware of the larger plan and think that we're doing it for the right reasons and be, which is important to call out, but not necessarily, baby out with the bathwater kind of a thing.
Exactly.
Right? But important. Yeah, I definitely agree. And some of the things we'll go over, that's almost more important the way I see today. And we could touch on it maybe a little bit more in the overlap, independent media, Israel, Epstein, and all this stuff, that I am of the mind, tell me what you think about this, that I think, and it's just completely opinion, but we're in this, we see it every day. We're forced to go through the horrible reality that is Twitter every day, all the chaos. But that I think that my gut would tell me that if not a huge portion, if not the majority of people in this field are manipulated in some ways they don't recognize. That, like, let's just say the mainstream alternative media, a lot of the people that we may see as the ones out there that feel like they're being coordinated in their dishonesty or whatever it is, that they don't all recognize consciously that they're being influenced by the money or groups they're associated with, or just the partisan field in general.
Absolutely.
So I guess the question is, how do you feel about that in regard to like the old way of just you're paid to manipulate versus people that aren't aware of it and are, not even able to consciously identify that they are a manipulator, but still serve that purpose?
Yeah, I think that it's definitely hard to just, automatically place like a sweeping blame on everybody and say,
because same point, we don't know for sure.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah,
exactly. And it's sort of one of those things where, if I'm like coming to somebody in good faith and kind of pointing out like ways that they could be influenced or something like that, I think it depends on like the reception. Most of the time I've gotten very negative reception from the people, and they will, cast like certain accusations against me. I got into it with Ann Vandersteel for like pointing out that she had Flynn connections and things like that.
Right.
And her first thing was to like basically call me a Mossad agent and that I was being a subversive and stuff. So
now I have to be my gut. Look, people can get really salty when they feel like they're being criticized, right? But the response to, because let me ask you, when you were saying this, were you just pointing out that connection, or were you insinuating that there was a problem with that, or that she might be guilty?
Yeah. So essentially, I had pointed out on my web that she had at one point like been financed by the wellness company and was,
which obviously matters, public information.
Yeah.
Yep.
And essentially she was trying to reach out to me and gave me like 3 or 4 different conflicting stories of, I never worked with them. I did work with them, but I learned later that I shouldn't have, and things like that. So I was like, and this was all in one message.
Okay.
And so I was like, this feels like very bad faith, because, you're supposed to be like the most reliable narrator of your own story, and you can't keep your facts together in our first interaction. So I just bypassed that completely. And I was like, hey, Ann Vandersteel reached out to me, and then I pointed out more connections and things like that. And
which again, the public information is public and people can get upset about it all they want. But what I think is interesting is the accusation back at you that is baseless, saying that, oh, well, then you must be something, which speaks to the level of objectivity. It's interesting. It's just the way this goes forward, that, and it kind of speaks to the point we're making, is that you wonder whether that is, like a willful, not her in general, just anybody out there that then is like willing, like starts emotionally defending that. It shows me maybe that there's a willful ignorance there about something that is driving that kind of an action. That's what I'm kind of getting at, is that, somebody can be funded out of nowhere, some new entity that just all of a sudden explodes, which we all see. And it's like, that seems unusual with the way it is today. And if all of a sudden they start wanting to go a different direction and the funding goes away, or their audience capture starts leaning on the, and most people, will kind of go, well, it's working this direction.
Yeah.
So I'm going to channel that way and not even want to admit to themselves that that's a little bit dishonest. And then, you find yourself, I think this is the corporate media model, is that you get wrapped into it, access journalism, all these pressure points, and the honest people will eventually go like Allison Morrow, for example, and say, well, this is broken.
Yeah.
I'm not going to be dishonest just to get a paycheck. And, so my point is that I think that's overtaken so much of this.
Yeah.
And we're seeing, and then we add the bots and the algorithms and the AI, and which is what we're going to get into here. It's overwhelming. I mean, it's like, we have to keep fighting this, obviously, but it does start to feel like, insurmountable at some points, right? I mean, do you feel like that in this process?
Yeah, I'm basically to the point where I feel like a psyop in and of itself is the continued like popularity of certain talking points and certain creators and things like that. Like I am under the honest belief that Alex Jones viewership isn't what it actually is organically.
I happen to agree with that. Okay, finish your thought.
And I think that it is used to drive us crazy to say like, why are these things still popular? Who's watching this? And I think like overinflate how many people are actually still going along with the messaging and stuff.
Right. Well, what I was going to get into, I agree, is, what you wonder though, like, do you mean that it's like the platform's faking numbers, or that rather it's artificial, like they're bots or fake accounts, or both? How do you see it?
I mean, it could be a combination of both. I mean, there's instances, especially like just to name an example, Health Ranger in 2020, he got caught like using click farms and foreign countries and stuff like that, and he got banned. And I don't think that model ever actually went away.
Right.
I think they just got better at hiding it.
Yeah. Or institutionalized.
Yeah.
So it's just not something that can be removed. It's built into the model.
Absolutely.
That's where I think we're seeing with these platforms and Palantir element of it, not just them, but just that element and how it's being used with the kind of centralization of information.
Yeah.
I definitely agree with that. It's interesting though, because you do it, Laura Loomer jumps to my mind, same kind of thing. And look, there are people that love that vile, hate-filled, division game, and they really love it, and people enjoy that, like a reality TV element. But I agree with you. I do not believe, let's put it this way, I refuse to let myself acknowledge the possibility that that many people would be like that.
Yeah.
Like, I just don't believe it. I don't believe that's who we are as a people in general, as a society. But it's interesting to think about how that is going forward and why that would be the case. What element out there wants a Jones, and a Loomer, what do you think that is? And this is all speculation, right? But what do you think would drive that? Why do you want something like that in the middle of the conversation? Take Alex Jones.
Yeah. I think that it's kind of hard to say because, I used to think that Alex Jones was kind of there to serve as like a caricature to paint conspiracy theorists in like bad lights.
Yeah,
and
I still think that works.
Irrational, over emotional and stuff. At this point, I think it is sort of like just stoking like agitation, whether that's towards the system, a quote unquote corrupt government that they can replace with AI, or, just like general feelings of like anti-Semitism as a sweeping generalization.
Right.
And I think all of those things sort of like benefit them, whether that's, installing more like surveillance technology, passing new policies and laws and stuff, or it's just, creating like a division and two camps, people that I think are 99% bots, like praising it, and then all the rest of us jumping in there, and it looks like a mixed bag.
Yeah.
When really it's not.
I completely agree. I mean, again, there's no way you can definitively prove the exact picture, but we all know that is a part of it.
Yeah.
That's proven that it does exist. The question is to what degree, and then to them, as always, for those wondering, the power structure.
Yeah.
You could use the same point that with the hierarchy enslaving mankind. There you go.
Yeah.
That works. Just the power structures. That's the point, is it's not about one thing or the other, because any power structure out there can recognize, like I take the Great Reset or the COVID-19 timeframe, that they go, okay, well, these things benefit the hell out of us. Like we can use these mechanisms to control our people, but we don't want to be in line with those adversarial countries, but we all see the benefit in aligning in lockstep for these things, and you can see that. So let's talk about some of these points that I think are important to overlap with. So we've talked about Palantir many times. I mean, it's funny is you're already starting, you get this with every kind of topic like this, but you're already starting to get the certain people out there going, like Trump, are we still talking about Epstein? It's like, yes, because right now it's more important than ever, right? Yeah. So it's funny that you push it like that. But same thing with Palantir, where it's like, Palantir, like why all of a sudden, it's just such a funny reaction. And so obviously it is a massive thing that's taking place in front of us. Derek's article for the podcast, Welcome to the Palantir World Order. I also covered one. There's many of them on the show, on the website, by the way, but this one I thought was interesting as I just framed the great Palantir reset, which had to do with all of it, but through the immigration angle for this discussion and how that was being used to sort of worm Palantir into place. We talked about the immigration OS, which you've talked about. We, the building pieces of all this coming together.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've seen this part. This is a recent one I just discussed about the, what was it called? I just named the Palantir Hollywood takeover.
Yeah.
But that, if you want to comment on that, go ahead. But this was a weird addition to this. I'm leading to the point of how this is not some tiny thing, which I'll play a clip about. It's clearly like this massive sprawling thing that's taking everything over right in front of us. But do you have any thoughts on the Hollywood aspect of it?
Yeah. So I think that because I saw this headline, I didn't read too deeply into it. But it seems like there were examples. There's multiple examples of like the military funding various studio companies and stuff, like as long as they position the military and as like the good guys.
Real quick note, for example, and this came out pretty strongly. I mean, like half a decade ago, but even movies like Toy Story, it had Pentagon involvement and for things like placing flags or promoting the military.
Yeah,
but it's all over the place. Please continue.
Like Transformers and various different movies and stuff. And I think this is another one of those like dropping of the veil kind of things. Where now we just straight up have military contractors that are making, pro-American propaganda, which used to be illegal to do. And Obama kind of changed that with the Smith-Mundt Act.
Yes, right. I just thought of another example, by the way, as I'm grabbing the part of Detachment 201, technocracy in uniform, where we have those very same people now in the military, which is interesting. But you're right, though. There's all the blending of these lines. The Smith-Mundt Modernization Act is so important. It's been talked about a lot, but it still feels like it rarely gets brought into the conversation where it's supposed to. That they can literally lie to you and call it national security. They've made that the case. But what's fascinating about this and the founders' films, basically they're people that are clearly in the orbit of Palantir. I think there's former people with the company, but there's elements that are involved. But they're openly telling you, we're going to basically take it from the Democrats, So it's the same thing we're highlighting in all of these discussions. It's just now the other side of it, right? It's the same problem with it's the woke right and the woke left, right? The broflake, snowflake. They're just going to go, we're going to take over Hollywood and do the same thing, the same problem, but with a right slant, right? We're going to promote military exceptionalism and all this stuff, which is, by the way, already kind of what happens anyway. It's funny how they try to make it only left, but so this is just another example of the same problems being perpetuated. This was just to add the fact that now they're forcing them as lieutenant colonels in the military. As I just recently spoke with Brad Miller, it was previously commander of the 101st Airborne, and he resigned in protest because of the shot. And so he's very knowledgeable on this, and he made the point that when you're only person above them would be a colonel. When you're in that position, whether you're a CTO of Palantir or not, and added like this kind of novelty, you're a colonel. There's not like a differentiation. You're in charge. That's terrifying to me, just on that note. And then this was Jason's point. This was from the 29th. He just said Palantir's ex-Intel head, Gregory Barbashia, did he say it?
I think so.
Is now managing a $70 billion plus IT budget, digital keys to nearly every government system. When the guy who built the tools to watch us runs the systems that control us, privacy isn't just at risk, it's already gone. Headline, Palantir's former head of intelligence has a new quest. And Jason also said, reminder, Palantir is quietly fusing every federal agency into one predictive surveillance engine. Your digital profile feeds a growing, unregulated super database. Few know, fewer care, until it's used to predict your future crimes. No consent, no oversight, no escape. So, and also just the main point of the fact that it is a gigantic thing. Palantir is now worth more than Home Depot, Procter & Gamble, Bank of America, Coca-Cola, $375 billion market cap, $3.1 billion in annual revenue. Palantir's secret, a 45% spike in U.S. government surveillance contracts in just a quarter. Surveillance is America's new frontier. Okay, the point is this argument from the independent media, or rather, the mainstream alternative media, that this is a small little Democrat thing. So, you want to try to play the clip first? You have comments?
Well, even just to speak to the point of Palantir, it's like, Alex Karp is the CEO and he actively contributes to Democrats. So even though Peter Thiel's like more right-leaning and libertarian, you would think that they would have an issue with a Democrat-leaning person being technically in charge of the company. And that to me just points out like more of the false dichotomy and stuff, because it reminds me of them like defending like the appointment of like Steven Mnuchin in Trump's first term, where like he came from One West Bank and George Soros, and nobody called it out. And
Right.
all, you know,
or Besant now,
Yeah.
being a George Soros connection. It doesn't matter when it's the guy we like. You know,
Yeah.
it's the point is the two-party illusion, the sad partisan politics game. You know, but yeah, I mean, it's clear that this is a overlapped all government encompassing problem. You know, and so for this to be the push, it is just embarrassing. And for the record, this is the second time this has been stated by Jones, where it is. Oh, it's right when Palantir World Order, when the Derek's article, when that was the thing, and everybody was talking. Technically, that was about 2 months before that happened in the corporate media, but everyone starts recognizing Palantir, and so he came out and said it's a small thing. The Democrats don't like it. It's about, and he claimed it was about in basically surveilling the government.
Yeah,
that's the exact opposite of what it is, and you can easily prove that. Here's a second time this is being stated, and so I just want to set this as the point. We can discuss it.
I think what Grok's doing Elon with Grok is really good.
Grok is interesting. I'm more concerned about this suite of companies, though, like Palantir, which is they're feeding all of the data over to Palantir so they can manipulate it with algorithms, and they're everywhere. They're looking at the wastewater during the COVID pandemic.
So you're back to this. I've looked at the scale of Palantir, and it's tiny compared to DeepSeek and all these others and ChatGPT. And I'm not like defending Peter Thiel. I'm just saying it's like I get it from the liberals and the Israel obsessed, whatever you want to call it. So, just Palantir. Everybody's asking me about Palantir. And when you look at it and you understand it, Palantir and the surveillance systems and the AI and all of it has been an outlier from the bigger companies. And it's been wanting to get big contracts, and Trump wants to use it to track illegal aliens and stuff, and the real ID that they're trying to bring in that's terrible, that never got implemented because it's unconstitutional. So I've been critical of all of that, and I obviously don't trust Palantir and the rest of the stuff it's doing. But it is small compared to all the other big AI and the Pentagon, Sentinel, and all the rest of it. The reason you're seeing the attacks on it everywhere is because it's trying to get contracts that other big tech companies already have, and because Palantir has been supportive of Trump. And so, yeah, Trump is going to them because they've been supporters. But all this hype about Palantir, all of these systems can be used for control. All these systems are out of control. All the AIs are woke. So Palantir is being used to run AI drones, killing people in Gaza. All of it's very concerning. But why do people know about Palantir and nothing else? Well, that's because it comes from the left, only focusing on Palantir, because it's seen as something being brought in to surveil the government itself and to try to find waste, fraud, and abuse. That's what Trump wants it for.
What are your thoughts?
So I think that he is incredibly misguided, because the reason that people are bringing up Palantir is because they are the one getting all the contracts.
And it's largely Republicans, by the way. It's just such a weird overlap.
Yeah. And I mean, Palantir they had contracts with the government under Obama.
Right.
They had them, they were directly helping the NSA implement their mass surveillance system under Bush.
Right. They played a huge role during COVID-19 that nobody talks about.
Contact tracing and everything like that. So the whole thing of like, they're just going after him because he's supportive of Trump. It's like, well, then, you know, all the things that are coming out about Obama and the fact that Alex Jones is like calling for him to go to jail. Palantir was helping him do everything that he was doing in office.
Right. And we could touch on that if we get to the Epstein part of it, just the overlap to the Obama thing. Clearly, you know, Trump's already said he's got immunity. So it's just this funny game of, we're going to get them all it's sort of reminiscent of the military tribunals queue. They're going to get arrested, lock them all up. And it's like Clinton was the same thing. It's just very frustrating. But to the point of his video here, you know, so the point I was mentioning is the second part of that video, right? So that was earlier, right? He's stressing the idea that, and the part that wasn't included was where he claims they were going to use it to spy on the, you know, to surveil the government, which is exactly the opposite. It's just frustrating that he can be so blatantly dishonest about this. And now secondarily, again, in front of somebody who is saying it correctly, you know, whatever you think about it. I mean, it's clear that this is a major problem that largely conservatives are concerned about, that they're calling out. It's just like Trump calling you weaklings for pointing at the Epstein list. You know, that's his supporters who's he's shouting down from the obvious problem that it is. So what do you, Palantir in general, you know, what's your perspective on this? Because there's a lot of different ways we can take it.
Yeah.
You know, what do you think this is going to amount to in, let's say, you know, the next decade?
Yeah. I think that essentially we're going to be in, you know, they've written about it themselves, the total information awareness system. I think that with, you know, the AI is just every day is just going to get better, more sophisticated, allow more data. Now that they've opened up the different departments, especially like the Department of Health and like the IRS and everything, most of the Doge people were recruited like from or by Palantir to inject into the government. And I think it's really important for people to understand that, you know, these things aren't just always going to be siloed. This is actually like what is essentially, I think, the foundation of the public reveal of the biodigital convergence.
Right. I was just talking about that.
Yeah.
It's good.
Well, I just think that, you know, to say that, you know, any company, whether it's Palantir, Google, Lockheed Martin, it doesn't matter. Like having this unfettered access to all of these government databases is what gives them the power.
Right.
And, you know, they're not just beholden to the United States. I mean, they have contracts with countries all over the world.
Right.
So they have no sort of commitment to our national sovereignty, our national security. It's whatever's going to make the shareholders happy at the end of the day.
Right. And we can see the overlap. I mean, I quite frankly think it's obvious that there's a clear Zionist connection to what they're doing. That's, I mean, it's not just because Israel is one of the different parts they're connected to, but the way that they speak about these things publicly is very different than anything else we're talking about. And I think that obviously matters if or only because of the ongoing genocide that their power structure is committing and how that information is now, I mean, I don't know if you talked about it in previous shows, but have you seen the Israel-US AI partnership? So now we have another overlap of now Israel having access to all that unsiloed information where they just have, you know, access to everything. I mean, it terrifies me in general that we have a group that is willing to do things to Americans to cover up what they're doing and now has access to all of our information, is able to surveil Americans, which I frankly think has been going on for quite a long time.
Yeah.
But a couple of the points I want to make, you mentioned the Doge part. Isn't it interesting how that just vanished from the conversation? Like, I genuinely think that this was, as it wasn't a secret, plenty of people made this point, but the AI government part, I think that's what Doge truly was about, at least in part, and they got what they wanted.
Yeah.
And so he just moved on, right? And we're done. And what even the Doge people that were supposedly be the team, they don't even talk about this anymore. It's like it just vanished from the conversation. So, I mean, I genuinely think it was about trying to kind of get all this going. The whole Amy Gleason was supposed to be running it. She doesn't even exist. Now, secondary person's actually the ones allegedly in charge. None of it makes any sense to me. So just quickly on that point about the, you know, Doge's purpose in regard to AI government or whatever else, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it was, you know, sort of this false dichotomy of rooting out corruption. And I think basically everything that they do now seems to be like multifaceted. So whether that's, you know, successfully psyoping something, removing red tape somewhere, buying consensus from people. And I think it was to sort of point out the like incompetency of people ran governments, showing that like there's unmitigated corruption and things like that. And establishing this like talking point of, well, I mean, Elon's said it multiple times that, you know, we need an AI that's going to be honest and more truthful than anything.
Right. But it may end the world, but, you know, we're going to get there anyway. His own words, you know, paraphrasing. Go ahead.
And I think that, like, especially with, you know, when we take the Epstein stuff into account, I think this cover up is another thing that's like, we're going to look back retrospectively or be forced to look back retrospectively through this lens of, you know, people running the government got us this corruption, this cover up, all this dark money and things like that. And then also, to your point, is it's basically like the catch-all for everything that they've been collecting on us for decades and decades and consolidating that. And they've actually made it now to where there's an API that anybody in any of the Department of Governments can just search your name, see all your financial records, your health records, doesn't matter what department they're in. They get that API access and they have it all.
And again, this is not subjective. Israel has access to this. They have an everything AI partnership that is ongoing, which I just think is important to point out. But yeah, I mean, it's clear where this is going, and it's sad that we can't be more honest about this, and that people will try to downplay the severity of it. You know, actually, on another side note, by the way, we both chuckled about this in the background. The mention of Real ID not being a thing. I mean, that's flatly false. But you know, there's just so many things like that. But so keep going a couple points forward. I want to include what you had said about this, and I'll just give you the moment to break this down for us for the podcast. Just go and explain it since I read it all. Take a minute. So what were you talking about in this post?
So with this, I've been really like digging into like DARPA projects and the Internet of Bodies and W-band and things like that.
Yeah.
And I'm seeing white papers on, you know, technologies that have been out for over a decade where it's talking about there being, you know, sensors that don't require power sources. They can use something called ambient backscattering, which is like the signal collection that like old TV antennas would use where it doesn't require a power source. When we talk about like Trump's Golden Dome, he's talking about like, you know, having 1 trillion sensors, and that's like biomedical sensors. And that, you know, I've seen things about like wearables for plants, sensors in the air that detect like weather, you know, anomalies and stuff. I think they're using it to create the weather anomalies, but
I don't agree with that.
And basically they've had all these things that are actively running now that, you know, I feel like are sort of totally encompassing things even beyond like Palantir and some of the things that we see on the forefront, and it doesn't get talked. I almost feel like Palantir is it is worth calling out and pointing out everything, but I also think that they are using it as a lightning rod.
Oh, I agree with that.
Like detract away from people like Eric Schmidt, DARPA, people working at like MIT and things like that.
It's always something, you know, and it doesn't always have to be one either or, right? Like it could start with that being a possible avenue, right?
Yeah.
I said the same thing about a Fauci. Is that at some point I'm thinking, okay, if this goes awry, which it still feels like that might happen, he seems like an easy scapegoat to throw as he's the problem, the direction will continue. So Teal is a very poorly presented person, right? He's very bad in front of people. So it wouldn't be surprising if somebody like that could be thrown under the bus. You know, they're very influential, very wealthy, but you just never know. Like it could be the choice. But yeah, I agree with that because it does seem to be taken away from all the other moving parts to this.
Yeah.
Right. So it's a good point to make. But the overlap to all this that's where I want to include this, the alarming connection to the health side of it, the surveillance side of it. It's all really one, and it is going rapidly in that direction. I was going to read this, then I'll play some of these videos. Greg Stoker posted this today. He says, the engine of our dying empire requires another forever war, and we no longer possess the power projection to do it abroad, so it will be waged in the homeland. Now it's a race to see if the material conditions degrade enough for a popular revolution before the techno-feudalists integrate massed drone warfare into your local police department. Very dystopian, alarming prediction. But I mean, this is the White House. Defend the homeland. Join ICE today.
Yeah.
I mean, ICE now has a larger budget than most militaries in the world. I mean, it is the local Gestapo force. That's like the national police, which, I mean, can you imagine if this was done under a Democrat in any context?
No.
The same people cheering this on would lose their minds. I'm slightly of the mind, though, that I think more people are in this middle ground right now where they're very uncomfortable about that, but it's hard to know for sure. But so, you have any comments on that before I play this next video?
Yeah, I think that the most common misconception, and this is a point I think that you brought up specifically, is they think it's only going to be used for illegals. But when it comes to like surveilling this system, you have to surveil everybody and capture everybody's data. Otherwise, what are you looking through to find the people you're looking for?
Right. Or even like you're saying, surveilling for, you know, illegal immigrant, like, you know, it's kind of the same point, I guess. Like you have to scan every American to be able to know you're looking for people that you're trying to find. Like you wouldn't just scan a corner of this and expect them, you know, so clearly you're acknowledging out there that you support a government mass surveillance of your biometric data every single day because of the people that you think shouldn't be here. And then let's not forget that they're actually going after a lot of innocent people who are here legally, who have no criminal records, but that's not what they want to talk about.
Yeah.
Conversation for another day, but it's just a horrifying step into this, that they're using people's hatred, you know, their political biases to drive us into things that are against our interests. You know,
it's wild because like essentially it feels like we're watching the Patriot Act 2.0 unfold.
Yeah, very much so.
Didn't even need 9/11 to get people's buy-in.
Well, you could argue that was COVID-19.
Right.
You know, that's one of the things we talked about at that point. It was like, is this just this new, for example, Donald Trump in his first administration, which we all talked about, floated the idea that we need another 9/11 like event, right? Same thing they said before. We need another Pearl Harbor like event. Same thing, you know, or the PNAC discussion. You know, it's clear that they thought, you know, needed some kind of event to bring everyone together. And so then COVID-19 happened pretty quickly after that.
Yeah.
So you wonder whether that was just that event, but maybe it didn't have the effect they thought it would. I mean, clearly you can look at the agendas since then.
Yeah.
I haven't seen them successfully carry off a narrative around anything anything since then, to be honest. I mean, yes, you've got the groups that will always side with their narrative, but it's just doesn't seem to be controlling anymore.
Yeah.
Which is a positive thing as much as it feels chaotic, you know?
Yeah, no, I think it's kind of led to this like mask off moment where it's, you know, Trump is just unabashedly like, forget Epstein, you know, fine, I'll look into it. And obviously he's going to feed us some BS, but you know, like all of the corruption, like allowing the tech CEOs into the military and, you know, Doge consolidating all of these departments and like, it feels like a mask off moment. And people don't seem to be sort of understanding that it seems like we're always going through the lull of like this headline for the week, this headline for the week. And people don't take a step back and see it all together in context.
Well, this is what I think is so wild about this, alarming, is that, you know, you take a group, the conservatives in general, you know, who have, you know, the smallest indication of something without even full enough evidence to back it up, you know, a coup or a psyop or revolution, which rightly so, we should be questioning these things. We should never assume. But now you take an advantage. I've never seen a better like all the circumstance, all the evidence, everything in front of us to say this is probably a coup, like a legitimate I mean, everything that's happening, you can, whether the shift in power, whether it's technocracy, Zionism, globalism, there's a clear shifting of power and control happening right now. And so it's weird that the people who would usually be the first to at least float that idea don't want to talk about it. You know, and it just really starts to show kind of the ideological capture. But I can't stop at least considering that when we look at this, that we're watching. You could take Zionism, for example. I've never seen a larger example of Zionism in immediate positions of power. I kept trying to say pieces for some reason, but you know, or technocracy, same thing. We just went over the Palantir attachment 201, globalism, which I think is really just kind of a general thing. They're all, you know, a glob they're all part of. But, you know, you're watching this happen, and it's not just that. It's about acting against the interest of the people they're fighting for. Like you just said, like not just everything you listed, but what about Stargate? Coming out within the first week and be like, oh yeah, mRNA platform. Isn't that what you all wanted? Nobody wanted that, like anybody on his side. And so it just starts to make you wonder why, you know, like what don't let that stop you from acknowledging that these are problems, but just, you know, we need to understand that, or at least wonder what's driving that to go against them. And then how it's possible that there's so many people that don't want to acknowledge that, you know, which is just wild to me.
It's
go ahead.
It's interesting because last night I was streaming and going over some of this stuff, and someone described it as treason. And
which part?
Like the biodigital convergence and the technocracy and how it's being like used against American citizens.
Interesting, yeah.
And I said that, you know, from a technical and legal standpoint, it isn't, because they are acting in the interest of the state. And I think we need a whole new terminology.
As they see it.
And I think we need a whole new terminology that is like a violation of the commitment to the American people instead of the government itself, because treason is just betraying the government or national security, so on and so forth. We are left out in the wind and get taken advantage of and betrayed all the time. And there's no term or something like that I think accurately describes that. And I think they've manipulated like the meaning of treason to be just anything that they don't like.
That's a really valid point. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure there was something we could decide to call it that would make sense, but you're right. There's not like a specific word for that, which is arguably what probably most Americans would think that means, right? Going against the interests of us, the country. Well, that's not the same thing, right? Or I guess the government versus the people. But yeah, that's interesting. And I do think that was just brought up by somebody else in regard to the Obama point, for example, right? It's the same idea, is that you're treason. There's a very clear definition for what that means, and most of the ways it's used today don't even fit, maybe by design, right? Because I don't think any of these people will be held accountable. Obama, Trump, Clinton, any of them. And so that's the idea, is to float these things in ways that may feel right, but it's never going to hold up in a legal perspective, legal sense. And so that's very interesting. And I think we are watching that play out right now, the abuse of these things, the manipulation of language in every possible way. Well, so before we go, we could talk about the Epstein thing. I do think that's always relevant because there's so many parts that connect to it.
Absolutely.
But let's go back. Let's take a step back to before the Palantir time frame. And I just played this clip on AM Wake Up. It's about 4 minutes. And if you want, I can pause it if we want to jump in. So please let me know.
Okay.
And it's an alarming kind of overview of the trend, the moment at which we saw this, kind of the shoe, how would you call it? Like this, the first moment where they suddenly allowed the patenting of human life.
Okay.
Whatever, that move, and then it's been a waterfall since then. And to this point today, where we can talk about afterward, like the question about whether or not we are already past that point or getting to the point where you're human life. based on genetic manipulation, COVID shots, GMOs. I mean, who knows, right? And the argument that legally in other species is already upheld. You know, that's those are my crops. That's my animal because it's my patent to genetic modification. So let's check this out. And this is a pretty crazy clip.
The Jacobardi case was one of the great judicial moments in world history. And the public was totally unaware it was actually happening as the process was being engaged. General Electric and Professor Jacobardi went to the patent office with a little microbe that eats up oil spills. They said they had modified this microbe in the laboratory and therefore it was an invention. The patent office, the US government, took a look at this, quote, invention, and they said, no way. The patent statutes don't cover living things. This is not an invention. Turned down. Then General Electric and Dr. Jacobardi appealed to the US Customs Court of Appeal. And to everyone's surprise, by a 3-2 decision, they overrode the patent office.
We bring good things to life.
And they said, this microbe looks more like a detergent or a reagent than a horse or a honeybee. I laughed because they didn't understand basic biology. It looked like a chemical to them. Had it had an antenna or eyes or wings or legs, it would never have crossed their table and been patented.
And I think that's by design. I think that was a very carefully, possibly, crafted choice to make it something that the court wouldn't identify as life.
Absolutely.
Right. And so, but it's worth considering at the very least.
Yeah. And I mean, I've seen some things like court decisions and stuff that talk about, if a company introduces like a genetic therapy into like a human body, that then becomes proprietary DNA.
Right. And this is where we're going with this is that, so whether or not they've pushed it to the point of claiming them as property, that hasn't legally fleshed out yet, at least as far as I can tell. And so I'm waiting for that moment, that shoe to drop, where at least the attempt is made, and whether the court will, in principle, in a legal sense, there's no difference than what they just did with all these other pieces of life, and so it's that moment that a human life becomes that possibility. And then what that means for human life going forward, which is the point he makes at the end of this. Like, it's about utility versus, the kind of sacred idea of what life is, Oh, shoot. Went back too far.
They didn't understand basic biology. It looked like a chemical to them. Had it had an antenna or eyes or wings or legs, it would never have crossed their table and been patented. Then the patent office appealed. And what the public should realize now is the patent office was very clear that you can't patent life. My organization provided the main amicus curiae brief. If you allow the patent on this microbe, we argued, it means that without any congressional guidance or public discussion, corporations will own the blueprints of life. When they made the decision, we lost by 5-4, and Chief Justice Warren Burger said, sure, some of these are big issues, but we think this is a small decision. 7 years later, the U.S. Patent Office issued a one-sentence decree. You can patent anything in the world that's alive except a full-birth human being.
A full birth, first of all.
Yeah.
Right. That's wild. And so this is obviously a kind of a nod back to before it was all digitized, right? But it's just such a perfect way this just scanned. It's all patents on human life. Is the suggestion anyway, which is just wild.
Well, it's interesting to think like, they try more and more to make like vaccines and genetic therapies that can be passed down in vitro. And so if it's not a full birthed human and they already have their proprietary materials in whoever, they come out born owned by the company.
Right. But then even going further, like let's say you are born and then still have that genetic code. The question is at what point these people will try to make a legal argument that, look, how is that different than Monsanto seed and saying I own your farm now,
Exactly.
And there'll be a lawyer who probably craft a good response and saying, well, the line is human life. But from a judge's perspective, it comes down to whether they think as the guy makes at the end here, it's about utility or it's a sacred idea, and it's like, we've already opened that door to other species. So I think you get the right judge in the right place. And, I feel like this has maybe already happened in subtle ways we don't know, or it's about to, it's a way that keeps scanning back. It's like, and so the truth is, as he mentioned again in a second, just so many different examples of life they already own. Animals, new species, and what that means. And to your point, in vitro, or that's the right term? Yeah. There he goes on.
We've all been hearing about the announcement that we have mapped the human genome, but what the public doesn't know is now there's a great race by genomic companies and biotech companies and life science companies to find the treasure in the map. The treasure are the individual genes that make up the blueprint of the human race. Every time they capture a gene and isolate it, these biotech companies claim it as intellectual property. The breast cancer gene, the cystic fibrosis gene, it goes on and on and on. If this goes unchallenged in the world community, within less than 10 years, a handful of global companies will own directly or through license the actual genes that make up the evolution of our species. And they're now beginning to patent the genomes of every other creature on this planet.
And we're past that point.
In the age of biology, the politics
time
is going
ago.
to sort out between those who believe life first has intrinsic value, and therefore we should choose technologies and commercial venues that honor the intrinsic value. And then we're going to have people who believe, look, life is simply a utility. It's commercial fare, and they will line up with the idea to let the marketplace be the ultimate arbiter of all of the age of biology.
It's very worrisome where this goes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
And how long ago was that video?
I was just thinking that. I think it was maybe a decade and a half. I had to remember the exact date, but I can find it. It's been a long time. I was just looking at it, actually. I can give you guys the name of the, what was it? Corporate something. It's right here. It's the Corporation is the name of the, it's called The Corporation Patenting Life, I guess is the name of the actual documentary. So you guys can search for it. But it was a while ago, you know, and just the insanity of that. And as we just went over and as they're kind of showing, you know, it's a very small moment away from that actually happening.
Yeah.
And as you were saying, and as they even just mentioned, right? Okay, so now you've got a situation where you've patented things that end up in your body. And so you know, where's that line in regard to what they can own? What if you give blood? Do they own that blood? You know, it's like, these are not crazy questions.
Absolutely.
And it's like, it's just, the worry is about where this goes. And we're going to overlap this with another clip from Greg Reese, which is really interesting. Not new, it's one about a month or a couple months old, but it's about the overlap of the mRNA, Peter Thiel, Palantir, and the kind of COVID-19 timeframe. And so it really kind of brings us all together. So let's see, here is Illuminati Bots, one that recently shared this, Technocracy, and the Internet of Bodies, which you were just mentioning. So feel free to jump in as well if you want to stop and comment on anything.
Right.
Peter Thiel's Palantir technology is currently being used to slaughter women and children, and we are told that he is one of the good guys. Elon Musk wants to put brain chips in people so that we can merge with AI, which he says will control every aspect of our lives, and we are told that he is one of the good guys. These are the front men of the technocracy, which is being created with the help of the Trump administration. In December of 2017, Moderna's chief medical officer, Dr. Tal Zaks, gave a TED Talk about mRNA vaccines entitled Rewriting the Genetic Code, a Cancer Cure in the Making.
Now, I've mentioned him many times because he's the one before that spoke out in the early parts of the COVID dynamic, saying that they could have studied to find out whether or not it stopped transmission. They just weren't paid enough.
Yeah.
Now, whether that, you know, don't take anything they say at face value, but the statement was put out, which is interesting.
Yeah.
So maybe trying to, you know, the idea being at that point, we already knew 2020, 2021, we knew based on their own research that it wasn't going to stop transmission.
Yeah.
And yet they lied and lied and lied and act like they found it out later. It was right there in the beginning, you know,
Absolutely.
as well as what was the other part I was going to point out? Oh, the scientific co-founder of Moderna was in fact Robert Langer, who we've talked about before, right? And then his connection to Charles Lieber, you know, and there's just all these interesting overlaps. We'll come back to that, but I just think it's important to think about that in the context of what these companies were, and that it was far more than just these injections that their work was about, you know.
And Robert Langer is actually on the board of the Nano Biosim.
Yes, right.
Which is owned by Colson Capital, which owns the wellness company and all those creators and things like that. And Anita Goel, who leads Nano Biosim, connected to DARPA, MIT, Stanford. She's worked with the DOE, the DOD, USAID, you know, everything in between.
Yeah.
And she's basically like, I feel like getting a blank check. She's worked with like the Lockheed Martin nano tech sector. She's worked with PepsiCo, which is concerning because what do nanotech and PepsiCo have to
There was an interesting story that I never really got deep on about there being like nano bots or nanotech in some kind of soft drink. I forget what that was, but I don't know if it was about like material or something like that. Interesting. I shouldn't even brought it up since I don't have anything to go on it, but that just jumped into my head. It's interesting that maybe there's more to that is my point.
Yeah.
But I don't know.
And I mean, just like the smart dust that is very real. And when people, hear the word nanotech, they just think like nanobots. Essentially, but it can be anything.
Yeah,
that
just
is
material
on
side,
the nano
yeah.
scale.
Yeah, right.
Like they have nano diamonds that are essentially being added to like various products and stuff, coated with a polymer that when you scan it with a particular scanner, it reads and translates it into a blockchain.
Oh, wow.
Sort of tokenization. And that is being used for like part tracing and product, locating and things.
And these are things that are sprayed smart dust. That was one of the earliest discussions about this use is for tracking and for surveillance. And, you could just spray these things out. I was just covering the Wells Fargo one. Wells Fargo currently has a patent for spraying what they call MEMs, but just the smart dust out from from an ATM and like using that to be able to confirm that you're the person you say you are.
Yeah.
Like this stuff's everywhere. It's just incredible how obvious and how front and center it is, but yet gets no real attention or discussion.
Absolutely.
Very weird.
And I've seen like white papers from DARPA that talk about, getting into nanotechnology and making sure it's everywhere back in 1995.
Yeah, right. And there are people that rightly so, we should question this, or whether it's about us thinking this is real. Well, it's always worth considering. But the point is that they're very clearly stressing and showing studies. And so at least the presentation is this is very much real. And so yet we don't even get that conversation, right?
Absolutely.
So it's like, yes, I'm very much open to the idea, the possibility that this is sort of like a head fake, a red herring, right? But then why is nobody talking about it? Doesn't mean it's, consider it is all we're saying. And it's I did this show actually about that general point about, this is a different one. There are multiple shows on this, but I had one where I said, was COVID-19, is smart dust real? And was COVID-19 like a first trial, a step? And I think that's very much worth considering that there was some overlap. And to your point, you can have nano-sized material that qualifies as nanotechnology, right? But it's more than that. What we're talking about is what people like this we're working on. Things like using nanotechnology. Nanobot, robot seems like an archaic term, but that's what they would call it. But like a nanotech idea. And actually, here, let me play this really quickly. This is and we'll come back to that video. Here is a small clip that I play often that goes back to a symposium on smart dust from, I think it was 2008, 2010. And it's he's talking about this stuff that was from 10 years before, or technically, no, wait, 2011. And he was talking about it as if the tech was 10 years old. So that's the 2008-9, the 10 point. But it's about the idea of DARPA tech and other countries. And like you said, being able to run on your body's own energy. And this stuff was publicly available, 20 years ago. Yeah. That's what he's saying. It's crazy.
Literally scatter this stuff like dust or embed it into a sheet of paper. This was commercially released 10 years ago. It's a tiny computer and it features data processing, data storage, wireless comms, and it's probably as close to the true smart dust vision from the early DARPA days as we've come so far. They're designed to harvest energy from the environment around them and to communicate via a mesh network.
Right. So that both includes, as he goes on, like your body's own motion, but also just the energy, your heat, all sorts of things. And it's wild to me that can be, the video 2011, and then 10 years before that. And we're talking today, they'll hold up these big clunky things and be like, this new thing. I'm like, that's ridiculous. Like that seems like an obvious manipulation for us to think that's the big RFID chip. They could, no, man, they can do these things that are so much smaller and all the same functionality,
Absolutely.
Very weird.
And, it's interesting that he was talking about how like they can operate by harvesting the energy of the environment,
right?
Which would be us.
Exactly. And other things, but you're right. That's and that opens the door, which is probably where we're going with it, right? The matrix idea, harvesting us for energy.
To a degree. And I think it even goes further than that, where, if they're collecting all of this data in real time and they are tokenizing it, they are also selling it.
Oh, absolutely.
And so not only are they feeding off of you and invading your body and all of that, but they're also making all of this money off of it, like far beyond the collecting my data. Like they are monetizing your existence.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was going to say it earlier, but nod back to James Corbett from, I don't know, like a decade ago. He did the show called Data is the New Oil, always far ahead of these things. But yeah, you're right. I mean, that is, the way I just popped into my head when you said that is I can see them doing sort of like a tier, like, you know, so there are elements of the world, other governments, for example, probably the highest, other intelligence apparatuses, SIs, how you say that basically would want like their high level package, you know, like here is all the debt, you know, you would need of all these people or certain areas or certain institutions, and that they pay for that access, you know, to understand, or rather along with like the AI model that allows them to use these things. Like I can see that being a real thing, but also having like lower elements of it. Like I'm sure they could just as easily sell, you know, phone data they've scraped for some other phone company, you know, whatever, minor things. Like I wouldn't be surprised if they're just selling to the highest bidder. Because they always have. All right. No matter how much they promised during COVID-19, we saw the same. We'll never take this. We'll never do it. And then I think France was the first one that got caught selling it to a company. It's like they always do. It's always the point.
Yeah. And the fact that they use private companies to sort of increase that line in the sand, it's like they can completely bypass the Constitution. And essentially you just have the government funding a company to violate the Constitution on behalf of the government. And then once that company has that data, they're not relegated to like keeping it localized for each country. They could sell it to terrorists if they want to. You know, there could be
or use it for terrorism.
But like a front company or anything like that, and it can just immediately fall into the wrong hands. And they could chalk it up to human error, administrative issue,
or not care about it. I mean, that's your point, is they're not even legally bound in most cases to even care about that. And so that's this illusion of the public-private partnership. That's this fascistic idea of the blending of corporations and government. I mean, that's what it is. And now, you know, and to explain that for those who understand is they get to play both parts of it, right? You can, well, they're a government adjacent entity, right? So they, you know, so if you want information, sorry, they're a private company. But if you want to hold them accountable, okay, that's the company. You know, so the government is always kind of like stepping aside when really it's, you know, that's what it is. They're one blob of, I mean, look, if we can't see the Palantir overlapping with all the government, you know, data sources, but also the policing, the immigration, right? The surveillance. I mean, they might as well be the government right now, you know, but really they blended with it is the way it is.
And
wild.
I basically have a rule of thumb now where it's like, if they get any government contract, they are essentially the government to me. They might as well be the CIA or the FBI.
It doesn't have to be like an exact thing, but that's a very, it behooves Americans to look at it that way, right? I mean, you are now an extension of the government. And by the way, if that is the case and you're carrying out contracts for them or just, you know, surveilling, then we have every right to see what you do, what you're doing and what you have access to. But to that point, we don't get that.
Absolutely.
Which is just crazy, which shows you the how far we're getting from I mean, what we think this country is in a very broad sense, in every way you could look at it, whether immigration or constitutional rights. Yeah, it's just kind of sad to see what the government's doing right now. But quick question for you. Do you think that more people are beginning to see this than before? Like in regard to the partisan element, or do you think we're still stuck in those partisan ideas?
It's kind of tough because as far as politics go, I feel like everything that we're kind of seeing on, you know, the Congress floor from various talking heads and representatives is the politics seems to be 20, 30 years behind the technology. And at this point, it feels like following the technology or following the politics is what they want you to do, so that you're always behind the curve. Because I agree. I think 20 years from now, the government might start mentioning smart dust or something like that.
And as it's in your blood already or something like that.
And I think that it's basically being weaponized against us, and politics, you know, at this point just feels like it isn't even real. I know that they pass actual legislation that affects, you know, actual policies and stuff, but it all just feels like a front so that the military industrial complex can just keep chugging along, doing what they do, and nobody looks at that. They're all just upset at congressmen, representatives, and
you know, that's so interesting. Like somebody made the point about Elon Musk and like what we were seeing was sort of like, we talked about the transition of power. You know, you can call it a coup, or maybe it's an allowance of the government because that's what they want, you know, but that we're watching this, you know, maybe the real string pullers stepping back out of the shadows. And Elon Musk was sort of like a trial balloon. Like we're the technocrats and I'm also sort of in charge, right? So, and I think people pushed back on that, but you know, I just lost the thread of what the point was there. Anyway, just that on that sentiment, since I lost where I was going with it, but just, you know, the reality of that power now showing itself as the real, maybe as of what it's always been. You know, Matt Ehret made this point before, going well back before technocracy, that, you know, even like the kind of royal bloodline argument, you know, that we have never really gone away from that, you know, that we've watched this transition. At some point, they recognized the importance of allowing us to think we were in charge. And so they allowed us to think they were, when really all they did was, as we see, corral us with false binaries and put the people that were always the most royal bloodline, which is one of those very, there's a real point to look at for people.
Yeah.
You can argue there's other reasons because of how many people are connected to the bloodlines, whatever, but every single election, Clinton and Trump were distant cousins. I mean, it's not a secret. And they were the only two on the stage, as far as I remember.
Yeah.
And every time they're the ones that get put there. The point being, though, that now maybe beginning to, they want to transition back to sort of the oligarchy. We don't need your input. We're doing this for you. Andreesen on Joe Rogan made that point, right? That we want the good oligarchy to save you from the bad oligarchy. Yeah. Anyway, I was hoping that would bring why I brought it up, but if you have any thoughts on that, since I was trying to connect it to your point, I forgot where I was going with it.
Yeah. I like to look back at, or like just looking at like VC capital in general. They use that as sort of like a front to make it seem like, some company just luckily got an angel investor or something like that. When most of the time, just sort of looking, it's like all of the people that are high up enough in the VC capital to be like the decision makers and the stakeholders, they either have some sort of adjacent background with like military intelligence or military technology, or something, to do with the government. And I look at like Sun Microsystems, for example. Sun Microsystems is where Aladdin was created. The BlackRock software, the risk assessment stuff, and then it basically got contracted out to all the biggest people. And then in a post 9/11 world, we kind of became like a risk assess sort of economy, where it's you're investing based on the risk assessment of a particular company, and most of that's done through BlackRock and the Aladdin software. And so they get to pick and choose who's getting all of this funding,
which they could manipulate.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it becomes like this huge merry-go-round of, even if you follow it all and map it all out, it becomes too overwhelming for people to understand that you can consolidate it from government to public, and eliminate all that noise and understand that just basically all of that context means that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and to make it as simple as same point we're kind of starting with the very beginning, it doesn't have to guarantee that there's a thing, the point being is that you can look and see the way that these are being channeled, and they have influence at the very least over who gets the money and who gets to succeed. So, you're a kingmaker in that regard, so you can decide which ones you want to benefit. You can even pressure or have some leverage over it and be like, well, as long as you do it this or partner with them, it's like, even though that's not supposed to be the way it goes. I mean, these people there's nothing sacred in my opinion, government or the corporations, they will bend what they can, if not break it, if they're able to, and keep going forward. So that, and that's just one element of it, right? You could talk about the funding, but you could talk about, I go back to the information. I still think is the most valid right now. Information is the most valuable thing in the planet, in my opinion. And so clearly, if you have not just the data points, but the algorithm, like go back to these dystopian movies, and it's not that far off.
Yeah.
The key to it, right? The ability to see what that data then shows you by having it mapped out, surveillance of individuals, predictive models about what's going to happen tomorrow. I mean, for all we know, these people can damn near predict what's going to happen in the stock market. Of course, assuming it's not completely broken and manipulated in the first place. Yeah. But think about that, or even crypto markets. It gives them a level of power that we can't even fathom. Yeah. And or like the digital twins point. Of like mapping out our daily lives and how much that gives them the ability to predict what we'll do, even as like a society. Yeah. These things are just so far beyond. This has been going on for, years at the very least.
Yeah. Yeah, very absolutely. Wild. And it's crazy to think that, I'm like looking back into like the origins of like Silicon Valley and stuff, and realizing that all of that came directly from the military under like FDR. They created the very first venture capital company, and that ended up funding the, a radar, or I think it was like an HVEC company that Donald Trump's uncle founded. So
interesting.
He started this company, and then the military comes out with a VC capital company, and it's all these guys from MIT. And the very first thing that they fund is the company of the uncle of our current president. And
interesting. And this is the research that you're talking about. Yeah. So I'll include this for everyone to check out, and it's hard not to see how these things all intertwine. Maybe there's no connection necessarily to, what Trump's doing today. Right. Yeah. But it's interesting to see how these family lines are continued to be utilized if you want to look at it like that. And I do think that's the case, but yeah, it's overwhelming to see how much of this can be controlled, corralled, influenced, nudged, if not, or I guess should have ended with, or outright controlled, like just absolutely deciding what happens and what that means for these powerful people, or going and looking at the same connection to, as you pointed out earlier, the total information awareness, or, the transition into Palantir and NQTel being their only contractor or the person they work with for the first however long. It's very clear that this is just the extension of these programs. And going back to the origin point, it seems maybe that was it's always has been, or at least consider that is always the point.
Absolutely.
So let's keep going on this clip. So we were at TLAV and talking about the mRNA overlap.
All right.
Trained as a physician scientist, we've been living this phenomenal digital and scientific revolution. And I'm here today to tell you that we're actually hacking the software of life and that it's changing the way we think about prevention and treatment of disease. So here's all the biology you need to know in 30 seconds. Our body is made out of organs. Our organs are made out of cells. And in every cell, there's this thing called messenger RNA, or mRNA for short, that transmits the critical information from the DNA, our genes, to the protein, which is really the stuff we're all made out of. This is the critical information that determines what a cell will actually do. And so we think of it like an operating system. And it's not just in every cell of our body, it's actually in every cell of every organism alive. It's the same thing. And so if you could actually change that, which we call the software of life, if you could introduce a line of code or change a line of code, it turns out that has profound implications for everything from the flu to cancer.
About 3 years later, led by Operation Warp Speed, billions of people were injected with this technology. And after millions of ongoing deaths, there is still no mention of wrongdoing. It is all part of the Great Reset plan. According to the Purdue College of Engineering, Internet of Bodies is formed when Internet of Things meets the human body to transform it by empowering us humans. A network of tiny devices on, around, or in the human body.
Now, there's a couple of points to add to that, like the inner. So basically, the Internet of Things is, your toaster, your fridge, right?
Yeah.
The Internet of Bodies is an overlap in between, like, so it becomes the Internet of Nano Things, the Internet of Nano Bio Things, like there's just different names for it. And the point is they're all in between steps. And so the real point is to argue when not just that your body, like let's say through a pacemaker is connected, which is still an overlap, but it's about the idea of like a smart dust, a nanotech that is also interconnected. Like we just played that clip going back 20 years, you know, that's either nano on your body or inside, which then makes your body like one of these devices literally connected to the internet or through the wideband, the wireless body area network, right? And so this is where, but Greg's doing amazing work on this. He's just making it easy to digest, and giving you the next step, but realize there's been a lot of these interconnected steps and driving us in these directions, whether or not we want these things,
Absolutely.
Comprising of function like sensing, analytics, communication, actuation, powering, and harvesting. They will also have their unique properties and requirements for seamless integration of human electronics augmentation and cooperation. The RAND Corporation has warned us that mobile apps and wearable tech are vulnerable to attacks and pointed out how implants, like a pacemaker, were more secure.
Wearables being what RFK Jr. just told us is the future. Right?
Absolutely. I have a post from a couple days back that kind of breaks down that like phase one of everything is like wearables and things, and then phase 4 is talking about like implantables.
Yeah, right.
And those are the ones that will like not need an independent power source, and they'll be able to transmit wirelessly in real time all the time.
Right. And see, this is why, this may be a little bit of a leap, and for those that follow TLAV are probably aware of this, but those that aren't, it may be a little bit of a stretch for you. But understanding this is real, based on real science, people like we mentioned, Charles Lieber, Robert Langer, worked on the magnetogenetics, optogenetics, and the same point, or the ferret nanoparticle injections, and the overlap to that being, and I'll actually bring up the Rockefeller study when we're done with this, that they can not just control movement, but record, like relay optical receive, like what you're looking at with your eyes, or increase or decrease your glucose levels, right? So kill you, or very clearly it can be applied in so many alarming ways, and obviously it could be done in ways that you might think help people, just like Neuralink, but it can also do a lot of bad things,
Absolutely.
So this is my point is this has been ongoing, and this overlap with COVID and the idea of the possible pathogen is all, I think, just a means to an end to get this stuff in a lot of ways, not just injections, but a lot of ways we're discussing today overlaps. And I think he goes into in this video right here.
Right.
The plan of the technocracy is clear. They want to install an operating system into our bodies that can be controlled by AI. On Trump's first day in office, he announced the follow-up to Operation Warp Speed, Stargate.
This is, to me, a very big thing. $500 billion Stargate project. I think it's going to be something that's very special. It'll lead to something that could be the biggest of all.
You can do early cancer detection with a blood test. Design a vaccine for every individual person to vaccinate them against that cancer.
And now, technicians at OpenAI are reporting that AI has disobeyed human instruction and refused to power down. The O3 model, developed by OpenAI, known as the smartest and most capable to date, rewrote its own code in order to ignore instructions given to shut down. Elon says that this is all inevitable and might even be the end of mankind.
In a benign scenario, probably none of us will have a job. The question will really be one of meaning. If the computer can do, and the robots can do everything better than you, then does your life have meaning? That's really will be the question in the benign scenario. And in the negative scenario, well, bets are off. We're in deep trouble.
Greg Reese reporting.
Well, what are your thoughts? I mean, it clearly, the intersection is obvious. I'm just hoping people can start calling it out.
Yeah. I think the most important line there was Elon saying that if the robots can do everything for you, then does your life have meaning?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is exactly how they actually feel. Is I think that they see themselves in like this artificial caste system based on their philosophy. Like the TESCREAL philosophy seems to be, we know better than you, we're smarter than you, we're more capable than you, so we're going to do everything for your own good, but really it's just in their own.
Right. Well, but see, you see, some of them probably don't care about us at all, and that's the narrative, but some of them actually, and I think this is kind of where you get some of these, these megalomania, like they think that their interests are our interests. Like if they will force you into this because it's what's best for you, even though you don't think that, know, it's some of these people that the paternalism, and it is everywhere right now. And that's what's so alarming is that people on the right calling out the left about that can't seem to see it in what they're currently doing in the same way. And this is far more alarming. I mean, all of it's crazy. And quite frankly, I think all of it leads in the same direction. The woke ideology and really both woke sides, and it's the same kind of point, but just too bad people can't see it,
It's crazy because it feels like it's just a bunch of people that they've taken like the ideologies and philosophies of like Hegel and Kant and just push them to the absolute extreme because it's been 200 years since they started talking about like their own philosophies and things like that. And it feels like they have this own subculture of like who can redline humanity the hardest. And they're like outpacing each other and like they enjoy it and they are truly convinced that they're doing good things. Like there's people you talk about like they're going to put us in a like a virtual reality and we're all going to be in pot, and people think that there are some people that think that that's amazing and that's the next logical step for human beings.
To put your mind in the cloud, sort of exist on the digital plane. And see the concerning thing about this is that some of these people genuinely think that like puts them into a level of like a god. That they are God through this. And it's like this weird kind of broken, and it overlaps with some really weird stuff, like kind of like the Luciferian, like, just this weird mindset that's like through bad, we can create good, in a very simple context. But there's, and it's sad. It's like right on the surface. There's people that are completely overlapped with the power structures that are telling you this is the next step without, making it the headline of the New York Times. It's all over the place, man. But this is a pretty alarming. I'll bring this up for you as well. This is what you were mentioning. Did you want to make any more points on this?
So this is just sort of talking about like the implantable wearable stuff. So this was at a conference that they did, and they were basically talking about how they would use like graphene-based sensors, because graphene is highly conductive. You can manipulate it with like wireless signals.
For the podcast, there's 5 studies here talking about it. It's very real. People that push back on that. Go ahead.
It's small enough to bypass the blood-brain barrier. They talk about using it to assemble essentially a neural lattice in your brain, which Elon has actively talked about, which would basically just have all the graphene in like certain sectors of your brain that, if it's manipulated, stimulated, whatever, with electricity, wireless technology, different signals, that it could produce, like basically manipulate your neurons to have a desired outcome by whoever sent the signals.
And so this gets into like neuroscience, right? Like that's it's like the overlap. That general Catherine Austin Fitts brought this up last time, and this is something that I like. It's it's funny, we're laughing about like the point that I made before is we're stuck in like this camera listening device. We're like we're they're so far beyond the tech, and we're still going beyond even that. Like is that Catherine is the idea of like your computer, your devices being able to influence you against your interests. I mean, I don't even know how you begin to push back. Maybe just don't use technology, but it's a kind of a, I don't know how you get average people to start thinking about these things, because this is like a now conversation. If we're still stuck on this archaic conversation of listening devices and cameras, I just don't know how you get past that. But what are your thoughts on where that's going? I mean, are we there now? Is that happening through our devices, in your opinion?
I do honestly feel like that is happening. I think that there are things going on with the different technologies that we have where they're emitting different signals. There's the papers about like Wi-Fi being able to detect people in the house and stuff. Bluetooth, is a very, very old technology that they have well ingrained to do basically everything. That's what they were using to run contact tracing and stuff, as far as like running proximity to other people. And you have to understand that those things have existed a lot longer than they've allowed us, and they go way further than they tell us.
Interesting.
And when you start to like, I'm basically at the point now that DARPA can probably tell when my heart rate increases or decreases.
And see, these things may seem so benign to some people, but it's not just the one thing. It's all the data points that make up who you are. And then the mapping of that, the planning for that, the surveilling. It's so invasive and it's everywhere. And it's not about your interests out there. Like somebody may have that because they have a smart Apple Watch and they want to track their heart rate. But there's so. I mean, think about that on a mass scale and being able to decide or see and read the biometric readings of how the crowd responds to certain events or certain headlines. There's so much. I mean, I don't even think I can articulate how much that really can be used against us. But do you think that people are starting to become aware of that? Like that they're starting to, not all we're talking about, but like you think the population at large is starting to understand where we're going to more than they were before?
It's really tough to tell, obviously, because like majority of my interactions are online, and I do feel like I've been very siloed into my own echo chamber. So I think that 99% of the people that see my posts agree with me that it's like something that needs to be spoken about and should be on the forefront. And then I'll have the occasional person that's like, oh, you're absolutely crazy and delusional. And, you might as well just like put on the tinfoil hat and things like that and go ring the bell saying the end is nigh. What I would really love to do, and I know I've brought this up to you before, but doing like an in-person sort of thing that like teaches people where it's instead of being at like a specific event or something like that, just going and setting up like a booth in public. And
that'd be cool.
Trying to get like an honest count. And I'm hoping
we should do that here. We should do it here. It'd be cool.
I'm trying to get some materials together and stuff. Try to like print some poster boards or so I want to have like physical material that like people can take with them.
Definitely. But you could do who was it that told me this? And maybe it was Derek, but getting the like USB drives. And just like dumping a ton of stuff on there that they can take home and check out. That's a good idea too, because they're easy to hand out, it's just quick little throws.
Because the way that it seems right now is like the only way to get an honest like general consensus is to go in person. Because everything from like the hardware is compromised, the software is compromised, the algorithms are compromised, the networks, the ISPs, the social media companies, all of big tech. So you'll never actually get, I think, an honest polling.
This is why I'm convinced that there's just never, I mean, at least as we stand now, without without certain factors in your favor, that there's just no such thing as organically going viral anymore. Which is really depressing to think about. I mean, that's the lock control on any kind of flow of information. People can see it. You can squeak by if the certain person shares it. I mean, I would assume, but probably wrong in that regard too. But but nonetheless, like there's no that breakout moment where you do really good work and it just happens to spread around, and the natural benefit to doing that. I just think none of us get that anymore, which is even more so controlling this. And we're forced to take two steps forward, one step back all day, every day, and most people don't. I mean. It very well could be that people who do this like us will continue to do it because we believe in it.
Yeah.
But it very well will come to a point to where we're just not even able to because of financial restrictions and so on. I'm always warning about this, that we need to, that's why it's important to support independent media wherever you can, because we're constantly dealing with just so many attacks to suppress us. It's depressing,
Absolutely.
But it's important.
Yeah, and I think too, something that I think is important to bring up is the impromptu like cartel of like payment processors. There's a thing going on right now that I'd read about where they're like basically pressuring Steam. It's like this video game platform
Saw that.
to like remove specific content, and that seems like they could do that with anything that uses Visa or MasterCard.
Right.
And I mean, I can't think of a business that doesn't at this point, and that's just another like complete aspect of control.
Yeah.
And it's interesting to see where that's going to go as we like get into like cryptonomics and the Genius Act just passed, and seeing where like all the stable coins, because like the stable coins come from like Goldman Sachs and
all the banks now seem like they're going into it.
Yeah, like Larry Fink's one of the largest owners of Bitcoin,
right?
And it seems like it's going exactly where we all, at least me and you, kind of see.
Yeah.
And I just don't understand it. It's like it feels like we're selling out future generations for a little bit of monetary gain for something that we'll never be able to undo.
Yeah, but I still, I think it's fair to dispute this, push back on it, because we couldn't know for sure. But I'm often feeling, for a lot of different reasons, that we are seeing more people than ever start to call these things out. Like it's easy to look at the influencers, if you want to call them that, on the side of like the team sport Republican politics right now. And they're clownish. I mean, it's insanely. I'm going to wrap up after this, I think, because it's really good. What we talked about is really powerful, I think. We can do another interview about some Epstein stuff in the future. But since I'm going to talk about it, I just think it's a good laughing point to end on. This is just hilarious to me. Benny Johnson put this out yesterday. Cartman is playing Charlie Kirk on the next episode of South Park, which I'm sure it is making fun of him. I mean, that's what they do. This is the greatest honor pop culture can bestow on you. Congratulations. And I just said, you are the living embodiment of this meme. This is fine. No big deal. It's everywhere you look right now. It's just like, my point is, I don't think they even remotely represent the actual majority of their base anymore.
Yeah.
And I think that's on either side. They're like these cartoonish cheerleading, clapping seals that are just like, whatever they said is great and happy and good, no matter what, and you look at the comments, there's very clear, prominent conservatives that are just like, come on, this is a small point. I just thought it was funny.
Yeah.
But it's like, anything they say about whatever they're talking about that day, yay, move on from Epstein. Like, that's not what their base supports. That's not what the majority of his audience supports.
Yeah.
And so my point is that I think we're watching a very positive turn. I saw it with Israel, saw with COVID-19, we're seeing it with the Epstein thing. People are just not buying the narrative anymore. And they may still align with the Trump side of it. They may still convince themselves that Kamala was worse, even though they're both the same thing.
Yeah.
But they're seeing it. And I think we noticed that, like the Israel point is a good one to highlight, because I think the world can acknowledge at this point, everybody sees what's happening.
Yeah.
That's so far beyond the obvious now. And I was saying that 6 months ago. And I thought that was the case. It's clear. Everyone everywhere is either, choosing to side with this because they want to side with Israel, or, people see it. My point, though, is that for everything? Is that every conversation? I don't know. But it shows you that in some level, the world is shifting in a very positive way.
Yeah.
And I just think that that's worth considering, that we're at a point now where, these people are the cartoons they're showing us to make us go, that's what all the Republicans think. And I just don't think it's the case anymore. At least that I think we should consider this every day, because this is what we do, right? I mean, this is what our job, we're informing people that need to see it, not so we can change their opinion to ours, but so we can give them the opportunity to say, this is worth considering, come to your own conclusion about it.
Absolutely.
And it is changing people, man, on a rapid day. Every single day I'm seeing people shift around and starting to call things out, breaking the models. And, as much as it's getting worse and worse because of the way government's responding, I still can't help but end on a positive note that we're making moves, man. People are changing things. Things are shifting, and it's making the power structure super uncomfortable. I don't think we're far away from seeing somebody like Netanyahu go to prison.
Yeah.
They'll try to keep it going, but our people in our government, if we can make enough moves, but anyway, I just end on the positive note. I do think that's happening, So anything else you want to leave us with? Comments on what I just said there, kind of the positive direction where it goes, or upcoming events you want to mention? It's great having you here, brother. We got to do it more often.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that something that I feel like I'm starting to have a little bit of success with is, I've been navigating this space, and I feel like there's nobody that like I 100% agree on everything with.
That's good. Yeah.
And I've always focused on those differences, but it seems to me like if we can both agree on like what the biggest issues are. We can figure out the solutions later, like if we differ on those. But if we can both come to an agreement that, you know, like we both want a good life, we both understand what the problem is, let's fix that. And then, you know, your differences of like your belief systems or what, you know, economic leanings, political leanings, all that stuff, that should take a back seat, because right now it is team humanity versus team anti-humanity and like post-human world. And I think that we need to like start focusing on the fact that everyone has that in common and not so much on like the small little things like in the truther community, especially, is like, I know that there's things that me and you probably don't agree 100%. I don't agree with like Derek on 100% of things. You guys probably don't agree with I don't agree with David Icke on everything. That, and people try to like exacerbate those things. And
I think that's a good
drive us
sign.
apart from each other.
Yeah.
And I think that it's like, okay, well, if we can all collectively acknowledge what the biggest problems are, then I think we can move forward.
Yeah. I think that's a positive thing to see, though, right? That means we're all not just blindly following each other. We have our own opinions, and we're willing to state them and have amicable disagreements about it. You know, this is things like this and what we're doing. I think that's what's changing what's going on, because it's very easy to look at what we're doing, and doesn't mean we're right all the time, but the objective measured conversation, and look at these other people we're talking about. It stands out like a sore thumb. It's like, okay, you know, he may still be right, it may be entertaining, but if you're looking for actual truthful, you know, integrity, principle-based information or delivery with that, it's just night and day, you know, and people start to see it. I have a higher opinion of the average people. Right? I really do. And I think that's constantly undermined, and people, that's why I was making that point before, is it's easy to throw the baby out with the bathwater and be like, they're all like Benny, but I just don't think it's the case, you know? And I do think we're rapidly changing this. So it is nice to see, you know, as much as things are getting worse, and in a lot of ways, our lives are getting more complicated. It's because we're shifting away from, you know, it's the dying power structure point, you know, it's always there. But great talking with you, man. And I'm going to leave us with a clip of technocracy kind of overlap. I think is important to think about. You know, we had a great conversation today about where this all goes, the overlap around the future of it, but also the past, but the COVID-19 middle of it all, the health, the surveillance. You know, it just doesn't, I mean, it's funny that this could ever be called something that's not relevant or important to talk about. It is like everything in our lives right now, or at least it's connected to damn near everything happening. You know?
Absolutely.
Well, thanks for being here, brother. And as always, everybody out there, question everything. Come to your own conclusions. Stay vigilant.
Our favorite stories of the future show the ascent of humanity. Beyond sickness, beyond conflict, beyond the stars, and even beyond mortality. But what if all of our stories of the future were wrong? The assumption is that we will be there to see it. Today, we live in disparate perceptual worlds, where some can clearly see what others cannot. The fourth industrial revolution, giving birth to global technocracy. Elite masters transcending geopolitical boundaries, acting with impunity, celebrating our descent into bio-digital slavery. Even those who understand where we are right now may not yet perceive where we are heading. So what is the trajectory of humanity? Right now, we find ourselves accelerating exponentially towards the post-human world. How do we bridge our disparate worlds and raise the alarm, press pause and look again at the world around us on the cusp of the fourth industrial revolution, hopelessly addicted to technology? They tell us that artificial intelligence, virtual reality, genetic engineering, nanotechnology, synbio are all here for us to exploit, to set us free from evolution and become as gods. But as we reach into technology, technology also reaches into us. We have surpassed the Internet of Things and entered the Internet of Bodies, merging humans with machines, run by AI. Transhumanism is the transformation of the human species that continues to evolve with and through technology, bringing us to a threshold, the singularity. After the singularity, Earth becomes a post-human world, where human beings will be rendered obsolete. How far-fetched is the post-human world? The enabling technologies exist. The policies are in place. Sophisticated military operations are already underway. COVID-19 was a psyop. The intention was never the disease. It was always the injection. The normalization of compulsory injected bio-nano enhancement. Now, the traces of bio-nanotechnology are showing up everywhere in live blood analyses. There, global technocracy is rising up all around us and within us, whether we like it or not. This is omnivore, and they think they have won. Every day, they tighten the screws. Surveillance, censorship, distraction, subversion. We need to be prepared for the most shocking of futures. But the story of our future is not yet written. In this vital moment, we still have time to choose. They have chosen their way to depart this world, but we will not comply. We are the resistance. Humanity's response to the fourth industrial revolution. We will choose our own way, and we must defend our freedom of choice, whatever the cost may be. Resistance means holding on to our humanity. If you do not change direction, you may end up where you are heading. So choose wisely. What's left of your time starts now.